Buongiorno, benvenuti al Global Energy Prize. Buongiorno e benvenuti al Global Energy Prize Summit 2018 al Politecnico di Torino, sempre all'Energy Center. Good morning everyone from Italy. Welcome to Global Energy Prize Summit 2018 al Politecnico Turin. Today we'll have the opportunity to hear first from some of the words. My name is Ignatov, director of the Leonardo Science News on Rai 3, and I have the honor to present. To give you a taste of the spirit of the prize, please turn your attention to this moment. Mr. Lorusso.
Il rettore dove si siede? Lo chiamate voi?
Il rettore è seduto davanti
qui?
Insieme con
Lo chiamate voi?
Ignatov, sì.
Ok.
Magari sarebbe bene sederlo proprio qui davanti, così non deve camminare molto.
O lì, allora sto bene. Sta caricando la presentazione. Sì, sì. Infatti per quello volevo. Io presentarglielo.
You tell me when. Come sta? Molto bella taglietta. Per lavoro non ci siamo ancora incontrati, ma prima o poi. Sì, sì, ma non nella sua, ovviamente nella sua nuova veste come lavoratrice. Anna, you tell me when. You tell me when.
To start, right? We waiting for our acting president. Just a minute.
Oh yes, yes. No, just you tell me when we are ready. Buongiorno e benvenuti al Global Energy Prize Summit 2018 al Politecnico di Torino. Siamo all'Energy Center. Good morning everyone from Italy. Welcome to Global Energy Prize Summit 2018 at Politecnico of Turin, Energy Center. Today we will have the opportunity to hear from some of the world's most enlightened scientists and thinkers. The theme they will discuss is modelization and simulation of energy mix in the future digital world, which means the future of energy of this planet. My name is Silvia Rosa Brusin and I direct the Leonardo Science News on Rai 3. And I have the honor today to present the Global Energy Prize Summit in Turin. We don't often stop to consider the importance of prizes in society and for the future of society. Some prizes are more important than others because they have to do with more critical issues of our future. They help society find solutions for crucial developments in crucial topics in this sense, in this case, energy. In the last 15 years, cutting-edge technologies and inventions in the field of energy have been awarded this prize. But to give you a taste of the spirit of this prize, please turn your attention to this short movie.
I was just at home when the phone call came.
I was amazed. I didn't even know the prize existed.
The Russian embassy in Iceland called me and said that I was a possible winner. I was just speechless.
With a prize like this, all of a sudden your family thinks, oh, he did more than stay so many hours in the office.
15 years. The Global Energy Prize has turned 15 years old. In 2002, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, at the EU and Russia summit in Brussels, announced the establishment of the award to solve world power industry problems. Our country took the initiative to establish the Global Energy Prize. Over the past period, this prestigious award has reached a high level of international recognition, and outstanding scientists from numerous countries of the world have become its laureates. Many talented, enthusiastic, and committed people.
I think the prize is very important because energy is the lifeblood of economy and society. It runs through everything we do.
The Global Energy Prize, created by the Russian government and pushed by the President Putin, is a very important political push towards such a new energy, economy, environment paradigm. We call it 3E, new 3E paradigm.
We would like you to hear the story about the Global Energy Prize firsthand, from the people directly related to it. I'm really happy because it's my mission of life. The award has become really international and open. It allows to incorporate and moreover apply in our industries those researches and innovations that ultimately have become winners. The importance of the award is high, as it really allows to become, to an extent, a driver of new developments. The award is certainly a mechanism of global discussion on the development of those tasks that are set in front of the world. Laureates. Over 15 years of the award's existence, the Global Energy Prize has recognized 35 laureates from 11 countries. Laureates of the award are people who wrote their names in the history of the world science and energy field forever. Here are only a few examples. The 2011 Global Energy Prize laureate, Arthur Rosenfeld, a developer of smart energy-efficient buildings. Valentin Parman got the prize for a breakthrough development of new catalysts in the area of petroleum refining and the renewable sources of energy as a principal contribution into the energy of the future.
You can see that the focus he has in terms of not only his research, but maybe the urgent feeling he had to try to be able to mobilize the other students he had and the research institutes that he's directing to kind of move society as a whole. That's quite inspirational.
Boris Katargin, the inventor of the unique RD-180 rocket engine. Something new and interesting is created, and then there happens a breakthrough, thanks to hard, diligent, everyday work. The author of a red LED, Nick Holonyak, and the inventor of a blue LED, Suji Nakamura. Their technologies allowed to start transition to energy-efficient white LED-based lighting.
In 2015, Professor Nakamura was awarded the Global Energy Prize for the invention of the blue light-emitting diode, which has become foundational for the white light-emitting diode, about 10 times better energy efficiency from that technology than the historical incandescent light bulb.
Inventions. People having made these inventions are great dreamers. They are obsessed with the idea to change the world for the better.
My father was a physics teacher, and he told me about the atom. And I was determined to study this atom a bit further.
They experience failures, but don't give up. Both the pleasure of rocket blast-off and great fails when it falls right in front of your eyes. Bring fantasy into reality.
Instead of compressing hydrogen, igniting it, you know, we did it in a very beautiful chemical way.
Rules. 3,000 experts from 90 countries have the right to nominate for the award.
It's often difficult to select the winners.
The Global Energy Prize International Award Committee consists of 20 people. These are heads of the most highly reputed scientific organizations, outstanding scientists acknowledged in the area of power industry, government and social leaders from 13 countries under the guidance of the Nobel Prize winner Rodney Allen from the UK.
I mean, the people we have on the committee are really, really world leaders in their fields. I always learn a lot whenever I talk to them.
The Global Energy Prize is an award for outstanding inventions in the global energy field, for discoveries, innovations, researches that change our world for the better.
I ideally would like to see somebody that has done something to advance fundamental knowledge around energy, and importantly, connecting that fundamental knowledge to commercialization, which is the essence of innovation.
Award. The laureates receive the Golden Medal of the Global Energy Prize, the diploma and the honorary award pin from the hands of the President of the Russian Federation or from the person on his behalf. The monetary part of the award comprises 39 million rubles. This sum is directed on scientific research or charity. Thorstein Sigfusson from Iceland has created a joint fund together with Tomsk University with our financial support. He also helped them receive the European Union grant. Another example is our German laureate, Klaus Ridley. He has used our money to establish such a fund together with Moscow Energy University. The three most influential Russian energy companies support and finance the Global Energy Prize: Gazprom, FGC, UES, Surgutneftgaz. Size. The main venue of the Global Energy Prize is by all means the popularization and development of industry research. The Global Energy Association holds additional programs for popularization of energy science among the growing generation.
I like the programs that the Global Energy has related to the educational programs they have to reach out, because without that link to society, it's just going to be something that's like a magic show that most people will not know.
The future. Receiving the Global Energy Prize is the sign of international recognition of the laureate. It is a great honor, prestige, and gale of emotions.
Most exciting moment in my life, and having the feel that at least I did a little bit for that made me pleased and also a little bit proud.
I want to support an energy superpower like Russia, which is innovating the future of energy in a very different way, which I think is one of the strongest signals that you can put out there. So I want to be part of that and to support that.
Well, this prize is really making the difference for our future. And now let's move to another short movie about the energy center, the place where we are.
There are several words often connected to the word energy, such as sustainability, transition, access, security, poverty, and efficiency. All this suggests that one must deal with multiple aspects, including technology, R&D, management, social sciences, and policy making. Supporting the energy transition is probably the best way to define the mission of this building. To tackle the energy transition challenge, the Politecnico di Torino indeed promoted the Energy Center initiative since 2016. We launched a number of projects to provide both technical and scientific support to companies and public administrations. The two pillars of the Energy Center initiative are the Energy Center House, a new building located inside the campus of Politecnico, which houses companies, startups, public administrations, and research institutions active in the field of energy. The Energy Center Lab, the interdepartmental university center on energy that provides a multidisciplinary approach to study the transition to a more sustainable society, given all the techno-economic, social, and environmental constraints that apply.
The Energy Center House promotes the creation of new business ventures in the energy sector, with the growth of sector-based knowledge leading to innovation, thanks to the synergy and the exchange of information between the different actors active within the center. Public administration, research organizations and enterprises have a place in which to interact in a collaborative way on energy issues.
With this vision, the Energy Center House can promote and envision local development based on a three-propeller model, whose actors are innovation, training, and industry, with a direct and close link to the energy policy-making process.
The long-term ambition is to establish a think tank that could provide strategic advice on energy policy and technology, facing the challenge of sitting the competitors together at the same table.
The Energy Center Lab will provide an integrated hardware-software framework to build and simulate future scenarios on the supply of energy and its final use, while taking into account environmental constraints and social technical aspects and new market regulations.
The goal is not only to simulate the competition of different technologies at different scales, but also to test the impact of energy and environmental policies, user behavior, and their interaction towards a more secure and sustainable energy supply.
We are proud to host in Torino this year's Global Energy Prize Summit. The Energy Center of Politecnico di Torino welcomes all the speakers and attendants and wishes a great and successful summit to all.
So this is the vision and the activity of the Energy Center, and now we are honored to have Professor Guido Saracco, Director of Turin Polytechnic, which is the root of our past and future scientific community. Who knows, maybe even a recipient of this great prize will pop up in the near future from here. Professor Saracco, what do you think? I think it's possible.
It might well be, yes.
Yes, and Professor Saracco
energy is one of our classical studies here. We have a department, we have this energy center, and we have a multidisciplinary initiative in this area, actually.
Professor Saracco will tell us about energy challenges in globalized world.
Yes, but let me first of all welcome you in this beautiful town of Torino, which which is a former capital of our country. But even before that, the university I'm rector of was funded in 1859. This university has 4 sites where we are teaching engineering, architecture, design, urban planning, and also we have master courses in another site. Our university is meant to address global challenges on a local and an international scale. We host about 35,000 students. We have about 900 faculties to teach them, and 15% of the students come from abroad. We are ranked in most of our specialization among the top 50 technical universities of the world. And we have a nice surprise. Last year, we were the first one in terms of employability of our graduated professionals. Being cutting edge in research and providing an impact with our work is becoming more and more difficult because the challenges we are facing are tremendous. The society and the world is changing very fast. Population is becoming older and older. The climate change is biting, but not always. Our Russian friends should be happy with that because it's bringing more hotter temperatures there. But you know, on a global basis, it's a problem. The digital revolution is taking place. The industry 4.0, everything is becoming automated. But this is also causing a problem with the jobs and unemployment, especially in developed countries as ours. So we have to find new solutions, and not only in the energy sector. Actually, there are several departments that are trying to bring on research and teaching in our university, but the most novel issue we launched last year are the multidisciplinary centers to tackle problems. Society offers us problems to solve, and it's difficult to solve them only with one specialization. It's no more possible. Among these centers, there is the energy lab that is located partly here, part in the departments of the Politecnico, and the energy center is in the top of this knowledge chain, hosting these visionary studies and hosting, and I'm very proud of that, the ceremony for the award of the Global Energy Prize. So a warm welcome from my side. Thank you for being here, and have a nice ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Guido Saracco, Director of Turin Polytechnic. And now, please welcome the Acting President of the Global Energy Association, Alexander Ignatov. Mr. Ignatov, добро пожаловать. Mr. Ignatov will share with us the vision and the achievements of the Global Energy Prize. The floor is yours.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, гости 7-го саммита «Глобальная энергия». Разрешите мне поприветствовать вас от лица Ассоциации «Глобальная энергия», которая является организатором этого мероприятия. В первую очередь я хотел бы поблагодарить руководство Политехнического университета Турина и энергетического центра, лично профессора Гуидо Саракко и всю команду за поддержку, оказанную нам при организации саммита. Спасибо за ваше доверие и интерес к проекту. Я убежден, что это лишь первый шаг на пути сотрудничества глобальной энергии и вашего университета. Сегодня вы принимаете нас у себя в Италии, мы же, в свою очередь, всегда рады видеть вас в России. В частности, в октябре премия «Глобальная энергия» будет вручаться лауреатам 2018 года в рамках международного форума «Российская энергетическая неделя», где мы будем рады вас и увидеть. Теперь разрешите рассказать об Ассоциации «Глобальная энергия». Она стимулирует исследования в области энергетики, имеющие жизненно важное значение для всего человечества. а также содействует развитию глобального энергетического диалога, в котором ведущая роль отведена ученым, разработчикам передовых технологий. Зачем и почему мы это делаем? Во-первых, мы считаем, что вопросы развития энергетики слишком важны для будущего всего мира. Именно поэтому мы поддерживаем разработки, направленные на повышение экологичности и эффективности энергетики. Как именно? Ассоциация ежегодно вручает международную энергетическую премию «Глобальная энергия». Видео о премии вы только что посмотрели. Особо хотелось бы отметить, что премия важна не только для научного сообщества, а это та экспертная среда, которая вовлечена в жизнь проекта, но и для бизнеса. Вот уже 15 лет глобальную энергию поддерживают ведущие российские энергетические компании «Газпром», «Сургутнефтегаз» и ФСК ЕС. Вкладывая в премию, эти компании не только инвестируют в развитие достижений науки и технологий, но и служат долгосрочным интересам развития человечества. Занимаясь поиском решения энергетических проблем, развивая исследования в данной области, вовлекая в отрасль молодое поколение ученых, мы верим, что это поможет оставить нашим потомкам разумный и чистый мир, пригодный для счастливой жизни. И если кратко описать основные достижения премии за 15 лет ее существования, то это глобальная сеть экспертов. Отмечу, что премия задумывалась и создавалась как награда нового тысячелетия, которая объединяет вокруг единых целей и задач талантливых экспертов в области энергетики из всех стран мира. Так и получилось. Еще раз повторю, на данный момент лауреатами стали 35 ученых из 11 государств. В Международный комитет по присуждению глобальной энергии входят 20 видных экспертов из 13 стран. Собственный пул международных экспертов, ежегодно оценивающих все представления на премию, а также пул номинирующих лиц, еще больше укрепляет связи по эгидой проекта. К слову, в процессе номинирования приняли участие граждане 90 стран. Мы гордимся тем, что премию поддерживают такие специалисты. Сегодня вы сможете оценить это лично во время их выступлений. И то, что проект объединяет такое количество экспертов, в очередной раз показывает, что наука находится вне границ. Она служит интересам всего человечества. И лучшее подтверждение этому наши лауреаты. Все они люди глобального уровня задач, которые им удалось решить. Все они не просто люди науки, но и разработчики передовых технологий. В прошлом году мы выпустили книгу «Глобальная энергия. Книга о людях, изменивших мир». Вы можете прочитать их вдохновляющие истории. Обратите внимание на вкладку, которая находится в ваших программках. Она содержит ссылку на книгу. Пожалуйста, заходите, скачивайте и читайте. А всем нам, участникам 7-го саммита «Глобальная энергия», я желаю интересной
to have an interesting and polemical discussion on modelization and simulation of energy mix in the future digital world. I'm sure it will be so. The purpose of this summit is to lead a discussion about the urgent problems in the energy sector, to find a shared vision in solving the current issues and to bring them to the public attention. At the end of the summit, we will publish the key findings report based on our discussion. And I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ignatov. And now we have an important official moment. Please, we need a table. You will see why now. Because the Global Energy Prize and Polytechnic of Turin are signing the memorandum about cooperation. Mr. Ignatov, Professor Saracco, we must do it in favor of the cameras. And I don't want to spoil the picture. So you're going to work together, so we can so you're going to work together?
At least if we will not have winners, maybe we will have experts to help with the assessment of the projects.
Мы надеемся на очень долгосрочное сотрудничество, хотя сейчас в нынешних условиях соглашение подписано на 3 года у нас, но в будущем, надеюсь, мы его пролонгируем и найдем точки соприкосновения, которые нам позволят работать и дальше.
long-living contract, and now we have a contract signed for 3 years, but we're hoping to find out other solutions to make it longer.
So this is not just a celebration, this is just the start of hard work together. Thank you. Well, I told you that this is really a new kind of energy summit. In fact, we will have also the opportunity to express ourselves. Because there is an interactive session later this morning, we will have some questions and also the opportunity to vote, to cast our vote. Please note, can I have the QR code? Please note that this QR code, if you upload it to your cell phone, you'll be able to answer the questions. This is the QR code. In the previous summit, the system was tested and it was somehow revealing and fun. You'll see later. So now we'll hear from our next speaker, Francesco Profumo. He's a well-known person here as a former rector of the Polytechnic of Turin, then president of Italian National Research Council, then minister for education, university and research in the Italian government, before his current position as president of Compagnia di San Paolo. He was also president of Iran. As a scientist, energy was his field and his passion, with hundreds of published papers. His speech will be about energy transition, the role of electricity as a commodity. Professor Profumo.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased that today we have this special summit in Torino. Just let me spend 10 minutes, not more than this, posing some of the issues that we have in the energy transition. And starting, first of all, from what really we have today and the problem that we have to face. First one is the climate change effects. We know that we read almost every day that we have two major problems. One is the temperature rise. We are talking about the 2 degrees, and there is a long discussion on how to reduce this number. But in the meantime, we have also another big issue, that is the temperature increase of the sea water. And we know that this means a reduction in terms of the glacier in general, and we are facing problems day by day. In the meantime, the second big issue is the global CO2 emissions. You can see from this slide that in 1 year we produce a total emission of CO2 that is more than 30,000 gigatons. Is a really enormous number. And this number is related to the production of the CO2 in the different countries. But you can see from this chart that we have on the left side that almost 70%, 68% of this CO2 is produced by only 6 countries. This means that we have a major problem, and this major problem has to be solved. How? We can say that these countries are requested to implement particular efforts in pursuing strategies for mid, long-term decarbonization. This means that the solving, not the solving, at least to try to solve the problem, is how to decarbonize our system. And I know that during this day we are going to have a special section, and Marta is doing, I'm sure, an excellent job. I have a long relation with her in China previously. And, but the COP21 meeting in Paris is for us really a milestone. And milestone means that first of all, for the first time, during the meeting was set up that the nationally determined contribution. These are really the key words that we needed to put in our mind. This means that each country has to be responsible for this. And you can see from this slide that we have the big 6 countries, or areas: China, EU, India, Japan, Russia, and the US. And these are the 6 actors that more contribute to this CO2 production. In particular, because we are in this frame, I want to spend just a few words related to Europe. And we have a mandate for Europe that we have at least to reduce 40% of greenhouse gas emission by the year 2030, related to the number in the year 1990. This is a big issue, big problem, but we need to face day by day. In the meantime, from Russia, we have something similar. The reduction is less because in some way, maybe you did a better job or you have a less industrialized system till now. And the reduction is between 25–30% of the GHG emissions by the year, again, 2030, from the level of 1990. For the others, you can see that there are a different spec, but always in the same line: decarbonization. What are the targets of the energy in the next years? Our targets very, very important. First of all is sustainability. This means that we need to have a sustainable system that go on with the time. The second is affordability. This means that we needed to have the capability to reply to the energy request. And the third one is security. This means that we needed to ensure that the energy request could be satisfied by the local and the global production. Local and global. Then decarbonization first, and now we move to local and global. And let me try to explain where we try to go. First of all, you know that most of the production is still carbon-based. The next stage is to go to the renewables. But we are facing day by day that renewables means to have in parallel to system. The renewable system that they cannot produce 24 hours a day or 365 days a year. This means that we needed to have a system that in some way is overcome when, for some reason, the renewables are not available. This is a big issue, only from the technical point of view, but also from the economical point of view. Then the second point is the transmission. Then first of all, we needed to go more and more to the renewable. Second is how we can transmit or how we can distribute this energy that could be produced in different way. And the third one, that is again a big issue for the next years, is how we can have a more electricity penetration in our end users. This means that we need to have more and more electrical energy used. For example, electrical vehicles from one side, some more of the appliances in our houses, most of the actuators in the factory side. You know, is really a pervasive main. And we needed to do more and more in this direction. Let me see that this is a quite good idea. Then we can say that in order to get this transition, we needed to start with the beginning. This means the production. The production has to be by power generation from RES. This means a renewable system. Plus what? Plus the electrification of the end user. If we are able to put together what we have at the results, the reduced carbonization, this means more and more decarbonization. This means to reduce the climate change issues. You understand, this is the issue where we want to move. But what we can do? Oh, this is a quite interesting map. You know, one of the problems that we have is that we can produce energy from renewable. We said when we have a sun, maybe, and when we have a wind. But most of the time, we cannot have both of them, or we cannot have in series of them. This means that we have some kind of problem from the production point of view and from what we can use, the way we can use this. Then there is a very strong research on this time. And one of the dreams for the future is to have a global solution for the problem. And in which way we can have this kind of stuff? Then we can have with using what they call global energy interconnection. This means that we needed to use the sun when it's available, or the wind when it's available, and we needed to use the energy produced in the different parts of the world when it's necessary. This is really a global system. And if you can see from this map, we have in the Arctic side where we can produce wind energy, and we have in the equatorial side where we can produce most of the solar energy. And then if we have this huge interconnection that could be available, if we invest a lot of money, this might be a solution. But it's a radical solution. It's the solution for the future and for the new generation. Just at the end, you can say that we started from the climate change, and we try to get this solution with the energy efficiency, electrification, and renewable. The second point is that we need maybe to integrate the microgrid in one side with the global interconnection in the other side. And at the end, this is really an holistic problem that has to be solved not only from the technical point of view, but also from the geopolitical, market, and regularity point of view. Then at the end, we can say that the energy transition is a global challenge to be addressed through cooperation, sharing of knowledge, innovation, and practices. And this are the words of the summit of today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Profumo. Before you leave, you somehow anticipated my question. So the big dream is the global system. So how much do you bet on it?
Okay. Anyhow, you need really to think that the dream, they can be reality. And this possibility to have a global interconnection is difficult from the technical point of view, because we are thinking to have a part of this interconnection with AC voltage, some with DC voltage, very high voltage. This means we needed to face really research first and to put in place. But I have the feeling that this dream could be a real life maybe in 20 years from now.
Because we desperately need
yes.
this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so
much.
Have a nice day.
And now welcome to Stefano Lorusso, full professor in hydrogeology, engineering geology, petroleum and mining geology, geothermal energy at the Polytechnic of Turin. Professor Lorusso is the advisor to director for the relations with the Russian Federation, responsible of the task Energy and Eurasia. He's also responsible for the framework agreements between Rosneft Oil Company, Politecnico di Torino, and Gazprom Neft. Professor Lorusso. Professor Lorusso will tell us about Eurasia energy challenges and cooperation.
Thank you very much. I will concentrate this short presentation. I would thank also Stefano Corniati, which is the author of this presentation, is also the vice rector of the Polytechnic. Just to make a framework in which we work and in which we can analyze what is happening in the energy sector, we have to point out our attention about what are the challenges that can affect also the energy market and the energy strategy. We are in an environment now in which we observe a strong interaction between technological revolution, macroeconomic instability worldwide, geopolitical uncertainty, new social models, and also changing in our behavior. If we think, which is the transition in which we can integrate our thinking about the future, We have to take into account what is happening now in a very, very challenging society and in very strongly, very high speed changing in our behavior. If we think some figure, for instance, we have more than 150 connections a day for our devices in order to check if our email, WhatsApp, and many other things. If we think about which is the fidelity to some brand, we have some figure related to the 80–90% of people that are not stable, if are not satisfied in the customer market. And if we think about which is the urban development, we estimate that in 2050, more than 66% of the human population will live in urban area instead of countryside. What are the drivers of this huge increasing, changing, and also the increasing demand of energy that we have? The first is the most obvious, is the strong growing of the human population of the Earth, with estimates that arrive to 8.5 billion human guy in 2030. And if we check which is the sharing of this kind, the distribution of this kind of population, we observe that there is a growing demand in the urban area and a reducing in the slums. So we have a growing population that start to live in a good condition in several places in the world. Take into account which is the changing needs of global economy, and we observe which is the estimates of different sources related to the global oil demand. We observe that all the tendency are growing, and the global oil demand will continuously grow in mid-term and long-term perspective. This is despite the very strong activity related to the renewable. In the right figure, we can observe which is the energy sharing between the different sources of the energy worldwide, and we observe that almost 30% of the energy demand has been supplied by oil, and 25% is supplied by gas and coal. So, which is the figure in which we have to concentrate in the perspective. An increasing demand related to the growing of the human population and an increasing demand also of gas and oil will produce several effects. In this diagram, we can observe what are the estimates, for instance, on the top right, about the demand of petrochemical products that will grow in the estimates more than 38%. And this is a very important figure that permits us, on the bottom of the slide, to assess what is the growing of the demand in the petrochemical respect the growing demand on the growing GDP. What's the meaning of this figure? That we are moving towards a mid-long-term scenarios in which oil, gas, conventional sources should be very, very important also for many future decades. If we think about the distribution of the energy demand and we concentrate on Eurasia area, we can observe that many figures, if we consider the big Eurasia, that is almost more than 69% of the population of the whole planet. If we check which is the energy consumption, the natural gas consumption, which is the electricity generation, and the liquid consumption in oil and gas, we observe that this huge area is the most important area in the world, especially for the future. And we concentrated on the greater Eurasia that represents 2/3 of the world based on the main socioeconomic indicators, which is the distribution, respect the energy, demand and the energy storage and production. We have two big areas that could be considered as bigger human energy consumer, and another area that could be considered as energy producer. If we consider this kind of figure, we observe that we have not only the storage and the consumer of strong energy, but also very, very important big financial district related to the necessity of money to work all this kind of huge market. What could be the future perspective related to the integration between producer, storage of energy, and consumer? There are many projects, but the bigger one, the most important, could be represented by the new Silk Road, which can connect, that is the red one, that would connect the eastern country, the eastern China, with the Europe by means of two track. The new sea in the future also a very important energy corridor. The North Sea route that will connect Europe and Asia directly in the long term through the Arctic exploration and through the Arctic pathway of the energy transmission. And of course, as we check by many newspapers, also the high-speed trade routes that are very, very important and promising strategy related to such kind of integration. Some key conclusion related what is the scenarios and the challenging in the energy market in the Eurasia area. First topic, the global energy demand will grow in the next decades. This is a figure, and it is not possible to reduce also the energy demand. So the effort of the community should be how we can supply this growing energy demand. The second topic is the energy efficiency improvements is required also in the oil and gas sector. It is not enough to implement and to produce more energy, but it's an important topic to produce more efficient processes to extract energy, especially from the conventional one, and to produce such kind of efficiency. Conventional fossil fuels consumption will grow despite the huge efforts in renewable worldwide. This is a very also political topic, but we have to be very, very clear. We could implement, and we should implement renewable, but in the next decades, we have to consider that the oil consumption, the conventional consumption of energy should grow independently by our efforts. Changing the social models will influence the energy demand and distribution because we change our behavior. People live in urban area, and therefore we have a different distribution. The requirements of the distribution of energy should be very, very challenging in the next future. Greater Eurasia is a huge economic and energy space that has all the prerequisites for the cooperation and economic integration, but most important is the Eurasian gravity is stronger than any external influences. The movement towards United Eurasia is organic and natural because it provides answer to a natural demand, depending by the growing of the energy demand, and it is independent also by other kind of reasoning. In the energy sector, the Greater Eurasia mutual investment, the exchange of assets and technology are fundamental to reach and maintain the sustainable development goals in the COP21, and this kind of integration should be implemented by means of innovation sharing, scientific, technological cooperation that are fundamental pillars of this general strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lorusso. May I ask you what kind of opportunities of a cooperation in Eurasia you imagine for universities, given this complex scenario?
Yes, it's a very complex scenario. Universities could represent a bridge between intergovernmental company and institution, and therefore university could represent the place in which innovation and in which enterprises strategy of the government could reach a good agreement and could make such a kind of a bridge. So the perspective, the Politecnico and the Energy Center is a sort of example of this kind of integration between enterprises, intergovernmental area, and from that point of view, I think that is a very, very promising activity also for us, also for Italy.
So you can see a sort of role between diplomatic and technical.
It's a sort of university diplomatic way in which we can also to facilitate the sharing of this kind of, and to facilitate the processes of integration of the energy market in the Eurasia area.
Thank you again, Professor Lorusso. And now let's meet one of the Global Energy Prize laureates, Rodney John Allam. He won the prize, the Global Energy Prize in 2012. The Global Energy Prize International Award, the committee chairman. It's a very important task, a director of technology at Net Power LAC. a lead author of the IPCC special report on carbon dioxide storage and capture, awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. Inventor of the Allen power cycle, which is a process for converting fossil fuels into mechanical power while capturing the generated carbon dioxide and water. His technology allows generating low-cost power for carbon-based fuels without producing CO2 emissions. The holy grail for climate change, Mr. Allen. And in fact, Mr. Allen's speech will be about energy transition from fossil fuels to carbon-free sources. We are hanging on your every word.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about what we might be able to do about these problems. I've been working in this field for the last 30 or 40 years, and I've had certain perspectives about what it will cost and what the technology will bring. So to start with, I wanted just to summarize what the two previous speakers have so eloquently presented to you, that the world has a very rapid population increase, that people have global communication, however underdeveloped their countries, and all of these people strive for the same standard of living that we enjoy in the West. And the prospect of urbanization on an increasing scale makes that even more an imperative. And the third one of those diagrams is rather a worrying one, because it shows the growth of CO2 level in the atmosphere, and we can see that that rate of change is increasing and not decreasing. The current value is over 400 ppm, and the rate is increasing. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the existing technologies, firstly we have to look at the way in which energy is being used. And of course, the concentration is on carbon-free energy systems. And we can see their contribution to the total primary energy consumption of the world. And we can see the growth of transportation requirements and industrial requirements that includes power, and then the general, what they call other, which includes some of the chemical and petrochemical processes, but also a lot of actual heating applications. And you can see that the contribution of the carbon-free sources, hydro, nuclear, and renewables, is still only about 15% of the total primary energy. And the rate of change of primary energy, the rate is increasing. So we're not reducing our emissions, we're increasing our emissions to the atmosphere. So what do we do about this? Well, this is more or less what existing technology offers us. The existing technologies are basically to burn the fuel in oxygen and remove the CO2 from the stack of either a power station running on coal or a natural gas-fired cogeneration unit. Those are the two primary methods of making power in the world, and both of those we can put amine systems on the stack gas, or we can run as an oxy-fuel system which concentrates CO2 in the flue gas from, say, a coal-fired power station, and we can then separate that CO2 by a process of purifying the off-gas. So those are the systems that we have available, and people have been working on these systems for decades, and they've reached a sort of a plateau in terms of their development. We also had gasification of coal, but that's proved to be extremely expensive. Whichever way you look at this, it adds 50 to 100% to the price of your power when you try and produce power from these systems. And you still don't get all the CO2. You, in a coal-fired system, are still emitting about half the CO2 that you'd emit from the same power station burning natural gas. So they're very imperfect. I started working on a system many years ago about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, which used CO2 as the working fluid. And this is a diagram to show how that system works. And it basically uses a combustor and a turbine. And the conditions on the turbine are very, very high pressure, about 300 bars pressure. And the outlet is about 30 bars. And the inlet temperature is between 11 and 1200 degrees centigrade. Now, when you operate a system like that, you make a huge amount of power. And the way the system operates is that the yellow represents a circulation of CO2 in the system. And those very, very small lines, which are proportional to the mass flow going into the system on the top left-hand corner, are the oxygen and the fuel gas, natural gas, which is going into the system. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you can see, if you look very carefully, the magnitude of the CO2 that's produced and the condensed water that's produced. So basically, the process involves recirculating a huge amount of CO2 at very high pressure and expanding that through a turbine with a relatively low pressure ratio. And remember that a power station running on coal would have a pressure ratio on its turbines of about 6,000, and we use a pressure ratio of 10. So the flow rate is very high, and the pressure ratio is low, but the volumetric flows are quite small. Now, when you translate that into a plant, it's a very simple plant. I don't want to bore you with this flow sheet, but if you look very carefully, you've got a turbine, which includes a combustor. You've got a heat exchanger group, which is called a recuperator, and you've got a condenser where you separate water, and then you've got a CO2 compressor, which is in 2 stages, and you feed oxygen into the system and heat it up, and you actually mix it with CO2 before you put it into the system. So you're not burning the fuel in pure oxygen, you're burning it in what you might call simulated air. And it has about the same combustion temperature as an air combustion in a conventional gas turbine. So you're running the combustor at about 2000 centigrade, and then you're heating this huge recycle flow up in the heat exchanger so that you mix from the combustor in the turbine casing to give you the inlet to the turbine, which is about 1150. And the whole thing, the secret of the whole thing is that it's a unique power system, because normally on a power system you put all the fuel in and you burn it and produce your energy at a high temperature. With this system, it will only produce high efficiency if you put fuel in at the high end and quite a lot of heat in at the cold end. It's due to the physical properties of CO2 and the way in which you optimize at these very high pressures. And I don't want to go through the physics of this because we haven't got time, but you'll have to believe me that the optimization of this system means that up to 20% of the heat which goes into the system is taken at a low temperature level, below 300 degrees centigrade, and is taken from the heat of compression of the compressors, which are used in both the air separation plant and in the recycled CO2 system. So you can also use this system on coal. It will burn coal-derived gas very effectively. You don't have to purify the coal gas. You can leave all the cats and dogs in the coal gas. If you gasify the coal and leave all the sulfur and cyanide and ammonia and other impurities and simply filter out the dust, you'll get a gas which you can burn quite effectively in the combustor. And at the cold end of the plant, certain catalytic reactions take place, which again we haven't got time for, but it's like a gas phase catalytic system. So what comes out of the water or liquid separator is not just condensed water, it's sulfuric and nitric acid. And all of the sulfur is removed in that process. Now, I just wanted to show you that this isn't just a pie in the sky. There's a demonstration plant which is in startup at the moment in Houston in Texas. It runs with a 50 megawatt combustor, and this is a turbine which is actually a 200 megawatt turbine built by Toshiba. It's turned down to 50 so that we can test the turbine, but we don't have to put all the infrastructure in for a 200 megawatt system. And that's the turbine. The top one of those views is how we tested the first combustor at a smaller output than the 50 megawatts, because the combustor is actually a rocket engine. So what you've got is a turbine which is driven by a rocket engine, and it runs at 300 bars, just like a normal rocket, and we had to test it on a NASA rocket test stand in the desert in California. That's the rotor. It's very, very small rotor blades for 200 megawatts. The first blade is only an inch tall, and there are 7 stages, and that's the outer casing. That's the complete turbine going in. The heat exchangers are very important, and they're a special type of solid block metal heat exchangers which are built by a company called Heatrick in the UK. And they comprise plates which are etched with the passages, which are placed in a stack and diffusion bonded with high pressure applied and at very high temperature. And they form solid blocks of metal which you can use for effective heat transfer, very effective heat transfer under these conditions. And there's the plant. The bottom view shows the plant actually constructed. The white buildings on the right-hand side are the turbine with the heat exchangers beside it, and the generator and the electrical transmission system. So it's a very compact, very, very small footprint plant, which is very easy to build. You could even build it in the middle of a city if you had pipeline oxygen and a pipeline for the CO2 coming out. Our partners are Exelon Corporation and Chicago Bridge and Iron, and Toshiba is the company that built the turbine. And we're designing at the moment our first commercial unit, which will be 300 megawatts. And we're hoping that will be starting in the early 2020s. So we're hoping that will be online in the US about 2022, 23, that sort of timescale. And that will be 300 megawatts. Now I want to say a few words about hydrogen. You have to remember that the emission of CO2 from vehicles in the US is now greater than the emission from power systems. So unless we solve the problem of vehicle emissions, we aren't going to solve any sort of the problems of climate change. The only, in my opinion, feasible way of doing that is to generate hydrogen. Battery power merely means that we have to put in extra power consumption, a huge extra power consumption, and it will mean an enormous increase and a lot of transmission problems and a lot of problems for recharging batteries. Because if you work out how much power you need to recharge a battery and you try and do it in a few minutes, you'll be staggered at the amount of power you have to put in. It's like megawatts. So there are certain problems over these systems which haven't really been thought out properly. Hydrogen is a good example of what we can do now. You can buy fuel cell powered cars. They're commercially available from Japanese and soon to be available from Korean and Chinese manufacturers. So how do we make hydrogen on a large scale? Well, we have to make it with 100% CO2 capture, and the type of process we would use is a pressurized process, and this is just an example of a 2-reactor system which uses oxygen, natural gas and steam as the feedstocks. These plants can be built now on a very large scale. The other thing to remember is that the work that was done on gasification systems in the 90s and around in that time frame, a lot of work was done on the combustion of hydrogen in conventional gas turbines. And the large turbine manufacturers developed this technology and demonstrated it on a number of plants. So you can actually buy gas turbine systems at the moment which would run on a hydrogen-nitrogen mixture. So it's entirely feasible to put in retrofit kits on existing combined cycle systems or build new systems that can fire hydrogen. You can then operate those turbines. They'll operate in off-peak, on-peak type of operation. And off-peak, you can keep the hydrogen plant going and produce all the hydrogen you need for fuel cell fuel. And you can distribute that fuel either as a pipeline gas to filling stations, or you can liquefy the hydrogen. And this is just an example of technology that was put in both Singapore and in Washington, D.C. in the early part of the 2000s, about 2002 or 3. Both of these stations were commissioned, one for Shell and one for BP, and you can fill up to this day in Washington using liquid hydrogen. And this is a typical liquid hydrogen tanker, which can truck around about the same mileage as a very large petrol tanker. In other words, one of these things delivering hydrogen delivers about the same mileage as a 20-ton load of petrol. And that's a view of the liquid hydrogen tank, which is installed on the Washington station. So in summary, we've got a situation in which we have technology available to produce power with 100% CO2 capture and hydrogen with 100% CO2 capture. We can produce the CO2 either as a high-pressure gas in a pipeline. I didn't mention, but the type of plant that I'm talking about produces its hydrogen naturally at pipeline pressure, 150 to 250 bars straight from the plant. The cost of electricity from these CO2 cycles is about the same as a natural gas combined cycle running at the highest efficiency possible. And for a coal-fired system, we can cut the price of power by about 20% compared to the best coal-fired systems. And remember, we're comparing with systems which have no CO2 emission. So effectively, we've got virtually zero cost for emitting CO2. Of course, you've got to store the CO2, so that's another problem. The demonstration plant is in startup at the moment. We're testing the combustor at the moment. The combustor is being tested externally to the turbine to go through its entire spectrum of operation before it will be mated with the turbine in a few months' time, and then we can run at full power. And we can build the hydrogen plants now and launch this sort of technology into the marketplace using existing techniques and existing capability in the contracting industry and in the vehicle industry and the distribution industries. So that is the conclusion. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, please. So everybody here is, not only here, is crossing fingers for the Allam cycle. So how long will it take to test all the new plant in Texas, all the different phases?
The plant has a totally automatic control system. We've built what's obviously the world's largest high-pressure combustion test rig. It's a truly enormous piece of equipment. It operates with the entire circulation system of the plant. In other words, all the plant system is required to test that turbine. We use cooling to take the energy away rather than producing power and then cooling. We're actually starting those tests this week or early next. Everything is in place now. We've put oxygen and fuel gas into the plant. The schedule is that we should finish by about June, end of June, beginning of July. We'll then mate the turbine combustor into the turbine, and we'll be running the plant, I should think, up to full power sometime in August. So this year, we should be on full flow and full power.
So as a science journalist, can I call you to know how the ways, how the things are going?
Yeah, you can call, anyone can. In fact, if any of you want to see the plant,
yeah,
you can simply apply and we'll be happy to take you around the site. We've taken a lot of people around the site to see the system because it is a bit of a challenge to even believe that it exists, let alone that it's going to work properly. But I think you'll, if you want to go in there, if you're in America, give us a phone and we'll see if we can arrange a visit for you.
So, grazie, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. We can't wait. And we cross fingers again. Thank you, Mr. Allam. The last speaker of the first part of this summit is Thomas Albert Please, the Global Energy Prize International Award Committee member. Tom Blees is an advanced energy system consultant currently residing in Florida, and he's the author of The Prescription for the Planet, the painless remedy for our energy and environmental crisis. So you already know the solution, Mr. Blees. Mr. Blees is the president of the Science Council of Global Initiatives of International NGO that includes climatologists, scientists, engineers involved in cutting-edge energy systems and climate research. Mr. Blees, as Mr. Allam before, will tell us about the crucial point of this moment, the energy transition.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to address you here. We're looking at the transition from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuel sources, and that subject in itself is a very sensitive one, especially for countries that make most of their money from oil and gas. But the issue of climate change is serious enough that we're going to have to deal with this. One of the ways that it's being dealt with in Russia, which the economy of which is dependent mostly on oil and gas, is they've become very aggressive about building nuclear power plants. And my work is especially, I work with a lot of different energy systems, but primarily I work with advanced nuclear power systems. Rodney was talking about carbon sequestration, and as a way of ameliorating the CO2 buildup and the greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels, and that can work to a certain degree, although we've never sequestered the vast amounts of greenhouse gases that we would have to be sequestering. But the problem is that if we want to go into to sequestration, we have to consider that the very act of coal mining releases huge amounts of greenhouse gases from the mine itself. And in many cases, the amount of greenhouse gases coming out of a coal mine exceeds the amount of greenhouse gases that would come out of burning the coal when you burn the coal for power. So it doesn't matter if carbon sequestration from a coal-fired power plant is perfect, 100%, if it's economical. It doesn't matter. We have to stop mining coal because we just keep cranking it into the atmosphere from the coal mines. Similarly, with natural gas, one of the biggest problems is that methane is such a potent greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. And just in Russia, which is a very large natural gas producer, most of the gas fields are in Siberia, but most of their customers are in Western Europe. And en route from the gas fields to the end consumer, some of the gas is used, sipped out to run compressors to push the gas through the pipeline. But much of the gas simply leaks out from leaks along the pipe. So by the time the gas gets from Siberia to its end customers in Western Europe, 40% of the gas is gone. So again, even if we sequestered all of the CO2, we've still got this vast problem. So one way or the other, we have to look at stopping to use fossil fuels, stopping to pull them out of the ground. So how do we do it? How are we going to produce the energy for modern societies if we don't use fossil fuels? Well, one of the ways is with hydropower, and there's a picture of the Three Gorges Dam in China, which is one of the biggest dams in the world. Hydropower can produce a lot of energy, but it's geographically constrained. There's no way that we can, and plus just socially and environmentally, trying to build new dams is politically very difficult. In the United States, I can tell you it's virtually impossible. But even if we build dams everywhere we can, we need so much energy for humanity that we're not going to be able to do it with hydro alone. And also, I used to live in California until recently, and we have a great system of dams there, but there was a 3-year drought, and by the time the 3-year drought was in its second and third year, we were producing very, very little electricity because the water wasn't there. So then the question is, well, can we produce enough electricity from wind and solar? And there are people who maintain that we can produce all the energy that humanity needs from wind and solar. If you look at their numbers, they usually assume that people will use less energy than today, which, even if it's true in developed countries, there are billions of people in the world who live in energy poverty now. And just from a social justice standpoint, this is untenable. People were talking about how the population increase in the world is driving power consumption. But even considering the population increase, if you want to be able to produce enough energy for people in developing countries to have the energy that we have in developed countries, the energy demand is going to skyrocket, even compared to the increase in population. Now, there's a university professor in California, in Stanford University, called Mark Jacobson, and he has a lot of grad students working for him for free, and they crank out studies about how we can run the whole world with wind and solar power. He's got millions of people believing him, including some big Hollywood stars and some very wealthy people. But among energy professionals, he's not really considered serious, and many of them have written scholarly papers describing the nonsense of this, that it absolutely can't be done. You can go to our website at thesciencecouncil.com and you can read the papers that have critiqued it. But even by Professor Jacobson's own calculations as far as land use is concerned, if you were going to produce enough electricity or enough energy to run modern societies, you would have to cover an area the size of South America with wind and solar panels. And you can imagine, even if the economics worked, which they wouldn't, the environmental damage would be just beyond compare. So the other option for clean energy is nuclear power. Now, this is the Palo Verde nuclear power plant. This is the biggest nuclear power plant in the United States. And it's out in the middle of the desert. A lot of times people talk about nuclear power, they say, well, nuclear is no good because it uses so much water. There's no river around here. This power plant uses wastewater from cities that it just brings in from sewage treatment plants. And it works great. So you're not using any water from natural water sources. Now, I don't know if this little thing is going to work, but as I was saying, you'd have to cover an area the size of South America with wind and solar panels. But if you built nuclear power plants to produce the same amount of electricity, you would only have to cover an area the size of the city of Buenos Aires. So clearly, when it comes to energy density, that's a huge thing to think about when we think about how are we going to power the world. Now, this slide was supposed to work, but it doesn't. There was a site that was up on the internet where you could see how much solar energy is produced in Germany on any given day. And you could search any day of the year. This is a summer day, and the little blue hump there up on the top, shows how much electricity came from all of Germany's solar installations on this certain day. And you can see that for a few hours, it produced quite a bit. But in the winter times, seasonal variations are really the Achilles heel of renewable energy systems, because this is an entire week in Germany with all the solar production from the solar panels, Germany being the country that's invested the most in renewable energy. Even if you had 100 times as many solar panels in Germany as you do now, on a winter week like this, you would not have enough energy to run the country. Now, people sometimes say, well, you know, it doesn't matter because if the sun's not shining, the wind is blowing, but this is a wind chart, basically, that shows how much the wind is blowing. You don't know when the wind is blowing, okay? Sometimes it's blowing when the sun's not out, but sometimes it's still. So you need backup, and anybody that promotes renewable energy will admit that you need backup. And well, this is, so you have backup generally with gas. And renewable energy advocates have kind of made a Faustian bargain with the gas industry because a lot of them don't like nuclear power. One of the arguments being that nuclear has a carbon footprint that's too large. But if you look at this, the carbon footprint from various sources of energy, you see that nuclear power's carbon footprint is actually lower than wind and solar when it comes to figuring the entire life cycle, the mining of the materials, the operation, and the deconstruction. Now this, Germany has decided to shut down their nuclear power plants and build more coal-fired power plants. This is a gigantic coal mining machine in Germany. And some of these coal plants in Germany run on lignite, which is the dirtiest kind of coal. And consequently, the carbon footprint in Germany is one of the highest in Europe. And so you really can't make these kind of deals. I mean, you can't shut down perfectly good power plants that produce no CO2 emissions and replace them with coal. Now, if we want to look at what sort of nuclear power plants might work, there's a lot of talk now about, I don't know how long I've been talking, how long have Okay. There's a lot of talk about small modular reactors these days, that it would be more economical, that you could mass produce small nuclear reactors. What I see happening is the transition is going to be away from light water reactors like the kind we use today, which operate under high pressure. And one of the reasons being that when there's an accident, you get high pressure spewing radioactive material into the atmosphere like you saw at Fukushima. Nobody died at Fukushima because of this, but if you could run nuclear power plants at atmospheric pressure, you do away with a lot of the potential problems if there's an accident. And there are some nuclear power systems that do operate at atmospheric pressure. This is one of them. This is the 800 megawatt fast reactor in Russia, the BN800. And it can, besides operating at atmospheric pressure, it can also burn nuclear waste as fuel. So the fuel is essentially free. And it's very efficient. The BN800, its predecessor, is still operating after over 30 years. It's the safest nuclear power plant, the most problem-free nuclear power plant in Russia. And the BN800 now is operating fine. They're going to be building a bigger one, a BN1200. And India and China are both looking at building fast reactors, as is the United States. I did write a book about energy. It's called Prescription for the Planet. And it did talk a lot about fast reactor systems. So if you're interested, you can go to our website. It's thesciencecouncil.com, and you can just download my book for free. I don't sell it anymore. I just give it away. But you can read a lot more about the technical aspects of modern nuclear systems in that book, and also about fuel recycling systems and that sort of thing. So I think that's probably...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your words and for sharing your knowledge and your vision. So what kind of advanced reactors can we expect to see soon? The ones you mentioned or new?
Yeah, the fast reactors like this, there are other models that are being designed now that are smaller. They're like 100 megawatts. But those are designed to be mass-produced like airplanes. So they're smaller capacity, but they're much faster to build. They'll be much cheaper to build. But the one
Sorry, smaller is also safer?
Well, smaller is...
No.
Yeah, I guess smaller would be safer just because there's less radioactive material. Okay. This is a fast reactor similar to the one on the previous slide that was designed by GE Hitachi. And it's probably going to be built, but the United States nuclear regulatory system is very clumsy, and so things are taking a long time. But fortunately, the United States isn't the only country that knows how to build nuclear power plants. So what's happening now is that nuclear power development for really advanced systems is proceeding in other countries, Canada, China, Korea, and the United States will come along later. But the one that I'm working with primarily now is called a molten salt reactor system. And this is the one that I'm most excited about. And it's very simple. Basically, you have a salt that is solid at 300 degrees centigrade, and above 300 it turns liquid. You dissolve uranium in the salt. You can use some thorium, but mainly uranium. You can put plutonium in there as well. And it's in this low-pressure reactor vessel that's just full of graphite. And the graphite slows down the neutrons. It causes a fission reaction. So when it comes out of the top of the yellow vessel, it's about 700 degrees centigrade. Then it runs into a pump that runs at about garden hose pressure. And that just pushes it through a heat exchanger, which then sends it out to a system that could use Rodney's system or a regular steam system. And then it runs back into a low-pressure vessel. Now, the key to this is you have a highly corrosive environment with hot salt at 700 degrees centigrade, whereas a regular reactor today runs at about 350. So you have materials challenges that are really serious. And a lot of people wanted to build these reactors because they have been built. They built and tested one for 4 years, and it worked fine. But they're trying to design them so that they can last 60 to 80 years like a light water reactor. And they could never give me a reasonable answer about what are you going to build them out of, unobtainium or something that nobody knows how to make. The key to this now is there were two brothers who designed and built the world's largest ships. And they decided if we could use modern shipbuilding technology to build nuclear reactors, we could make this work. And then I was working with them for the past few years, and we decided we're not going to just build these reactors and then put them on land. We're going to build the entire power plant on a ship. And so these ships have now been designed, and this is a 4-year project. In 4 years, we'll be able to have one of these ships built. It's a 500 megawatt power plant. So if you wanted a 1 gigawatt power plant, you just bring in 2 of them. And the way they get around the materials issues is by using modern shipbuilding technology, which you can do with this because this, like the fast reactors, this operates at atmospheric pressure. You can make the economics work so it will be cheaper than building a coal-fired power plant, even if you throw away the reactor after 4 years. And they know it'll last 4 years because we ran one for 4 years already. So it'll probably last 10 years, which is great, because if the economics work for 4 years and you get to run it for 10, you're just making extra money. After 4 years, you would have a ship come in with these modules, and you would just swap out the modules. So one of the beautiful parts about this is that many developing countries don't have money to put into building power plants, but they desperately need power to develop and to raise their standard of living. In a case like this, countries that do have the money to build shipyards, to build these power ships, Russia, China, we're talking with Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, Korea, India, they would be able to build dedicated shipyards. They would own these ships, and say a country along the coast, say Ghana wants electricity, you could float one of these down to Ghana and plug it into the grid in Ghana. Any money that the Ghanaians have to put into their electricity system, they could just extend their grid. That would be the extent of it. They would buy electricity from, say, Saudi Arabia if the Saudis happen to own the ship. The Saudis then become a utility company. And even if the Saudis sold them electricity for half the average price in Europe per kilowatt hour, a power ship like this would pay for itself in less than 3 years.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Blaise. Now it's time for a little break. We'll be back in a few minutes. We have a very tough schedule, many interesting speakers. See you soon.
una bottiglia d'acqua, per favore. Ne manca... Sì, ne manca una.
Che a questo punto uno devo...
No, lui si siede sulla sedia, arriva lì e lui si siede sulla sedia. E lei deve stare. Too complicated. Huh? No, come on. It's my job. Don't worry.
for outstanding scientific research and technological development in energy, which contribute to efficiency and environmentally friendly energy sources for the benefit of humanity. The award was established in Russia with the support of leading Russian energy companies. The Global Energy Prize promotes energy development as a science and demonstrates the importance of international energy cooperation, as well as public and private investment in energy supply, energy efficiency, and energy security. It stands for the belief that advances in science and technology should serve the long-term interests of human development, improving social security and living standards of people in all countries. The work of the prize is cyclic. Each annual nominational cycle consists of several stages. First stage is an application period. We get applications from nominators. Second stage is preliminary expertise of submitted applications by the organizers of Global Energy Prize. Third stage is in independent expertise of the applications. Then an International Award Committee experts group is being formed. They form a short list of nominees for the prize. Then an International Award Committee evaluates application. On the next stage, Executive Secretary of the Working Group prepares presentation for the International Award Committee. Then, committee gathers up for the meeting to evaluate the nominees and discuss who will be the winner of the Global Energy Prize current year. They do the final choice. On the next stage, we announce the name of new laureate. Then the ceremony is held. It is famous for its unique atmosphere. It is usually widely broadcasted by several federal channels and leading media editions. Laureates are presented with their award by the President of Russia or by a person on his behalf. It is a significant event in the world of energy. Then we prepare for the beginning of the next nominational cycle. How can you join the important work of Global Energy Prize? Global Energy Association needs talented scientists and specialists in the field of energy. You can become a nominator, and with the beginning of the new nominational cycle, put forward a candidate who you think is worth this high award. The list of those who are eligible to nominate a scientist for the prize consists of more than 3,000 scientists from 90 countries in the world and is updated annually. You can join the pool of experts. The experts pool consists of independent experts plucked from international energy organizations, scientific bodies and energy industry. Once the nomination process is closed, the experts pool makes recommendations in form of preliminary expert assessment of the nominees and their scientific achievements to the International Award Committee, which then makes the final selection of the laureates. Information of the experts is to remain confidential. Results of the experts' work shall not be made public. The International Award Committee is responsible for making the final selection of the Global Energy Prize. The committee consists of 20 members and includes representatives of the most reputable scientific and academic organizations as well as governmental and public figures from Russia and abroad. In 15 years since its foundation, the Global Energy Prize has been awarded to 35 scientists and researchers around the world who have demonstrated exceptional achievement in their field. How to put forward a nominee? Link nomination.gprize.org. Log in. After your authorization, you will be able to submit applications. Self-nominating is prohibited. More about our laureates and their motivational stories you can read in the book The Global Energy Prize, a tribute to those who changed the world. Follow us on our website globalenergy.org, on Facebook and YouTube channel. The Global Energy Prize is an independent award for outstanding scientific research and technological development in energy, which contribute to efficiency and environmentally friendly energy sources for the benefit of humanity. The award was established in Russia with the support of leading Russian energy companies. The Global Energy Prize promotes energy development as a science and demonstrates the importance of international energy cooperation, as well as public and private investment in energy supply, energy efficiency, and energy security. It stands for the belief that advances in science and technology should serve the long-term interests of human development, improving social security and living standards of people in all countries. The work of the prize is cyclic. Each annual nominational cycle consists of several stages. First stage is an application period. We get applications from nominators. Second stage is preliminary expertise of submitted applications by the organizers of Global Energy Prize. Third stage is in independent expertise of the applications. Then an international award committee experts group is being formed. They form a short list of nominees for the prize. Then an international award committee evaluates application. On the next stage, Executive Secretary of the Working Group prepares presentation for the International Award Committee. Then, committee gathers up for the meeting to evaluate the nominees and discuss who will be the winner of the Global Energy Prize current year. They do the final choice. On the next stage, we announce the name of new laureate. Then the ceremony is held. It is famous for its unique atmosphere. It is usually widely broadcasted by several federal channels and leading media editions. Laureates are presented with their award by the President of Russia or by a person on his behalf. It is a significant event in the world of energy. Then we prepare for the beginning of the next nominational cycle. How can you join the important work of Global Energy Prize? Global Energy Association needs talented scientists and specialists in the field of energy. You can become a nominator, and with the beginning of the new nominational cycle, put forward a candidate who you think is worth this high award. The list of those who are eligible to nominate a scientist for the prize consists of more than 3,000 scientists from 90 countries in the world and is updated annually. You can join the pool of experts. The experts pool consists of independent experts plucked from international energy organizations, scientific bodies and energy industry. Once the nomination process is closed, the experts pool makes recommendations in form of preliminary expert assessment of the nominees and their scientific achievements to the International Award Committee, which then makes the final selection of the laureates. Information on the experts is to remain confidential. Results of the experts' work shall not be made public. The International Award Committee is responsible for making the final selection of the Global Energy Prize. The committee consists of 20 members and includes representatives of the most reputable scientific and academic organizations as well as governmental and public figures from Russia and abroad. In 15 years since its foundation, the Global Energy Prize has been awarded to 35 scientists and researchers around the world who have demonstrated exceptional achievement in their field. How to put forward a nominee? Link nomination.gprize.org. Log in. After your authorization, you will be able to submit applications. Self-nominating is prohibited. More about our laureates and their motivational stories you can read in the book The Global Energy Prize, a tribute to those who changed the world. Follow us on our website globalenergy.org, on Facebook and YouTube channel. The Global Energy Prize is an independent award for outstanding scientific research and technological development in energy, which contribute to efficiency and environmentally friendly energy sources for the benefit of humanity. The award was established in Russia with the support of leading Russian energy companies. The Global Energy Prize promotes energy development as a science and demonstrates the importance of international energy cooperation, as well as public and private investment in energy supply, energy efficiency and energy security. It stands for the belief that advances in science and technology should serve the long-term interests of human development, improving social security and living standards of people in all countries. The work of the prize is cyclic. Each annual nominational cycle consists of several stages. First stage is an application period. We get applications from nominators. Second stage is preliminary expertise of submitted applications by the organizers of Global Energy Prize. Third stage is in independent expertise of the applications. Then an International Award Committee experts group is being formed. They form a short list of nominees for the prize. Then an International Award Committee evaluates application. On the next stage, Executive Secretary of the Working Group prepares presentation for the International Award Committee. Then, committee gathers up for the meeting to evaluate the nominees and discuss who will be the winner of the Global Energy Prize current year. They do the final choice. On the next stage, we announce the name of new laureate. Then the ceremony is held. It is famous for its unique atmosphere. It is usually widely broadcasted by several federal channels and leading media editions. Laureates are presented with their award by the President of Russia or by a person on his behalf. It is a significant event in the world of energy. Then we prepare for the beginning of the next nominational cycle. How can you join the important work of Global Energy Prize? Global Energy Association meets talented scientists and specialists in the field of energy. You can become a nominator, and with the beginning of the new nominational cycle, put forward a candidate who you think is worth this high award. The list of those who are eligible to nominate a scientist for the prize consists of more than 3,000 scientists from 90 countries in the world and is updated annually. You can join the pool of experts. The experts pool consists of independent experts plucked from international energy organizations, scientific bodies and energy industry. Once the nomination process is closed, the experts pool makes recommendations in form of preliminary expert assessment of the nominees and their scientific achievements to the International Award Committee, which then makes the final selection of the laureates. Information on the experts is to remain confidential. Results of the experts' work shall not be made public. The International Award Committee is responsible for making the final selection of the Global Energy Prize. The committee consists of 20 members and includes representatives of the most reputable scientific and academic organizations as well as governmental and public figures from Russia and abroad. In 15 years since its foundation, the Global Energy Prize has been awarded to 35 scientists and researchers around the world who have demonstrated exceptional achievement in their field. How to put forward a nominee? Link nomination.gprize.org. Log in. After your authorization, you will be able to submit applications. Self-nominating is prohibited. More about our laureates and their motivational stories you can read in the book The Global Energy Prize, a tribute to those who changed the world. Follow us on our website globalenergy.org, on Facebook and YouTube channel.
Tecnici sul lavoro tecnica. Mr. Blease si aveva realizzato che si era allungato e quindi si è allungato pure di più. È stato fortissimo. È stato fortissimo, come dire. Tesoro, ti sembra che venga fuori qualcosetta? Vabbè, ma no, ma poi dobbiamo mettere nel contesto. Tra l'altro io ho ricevuto tutte alcune cose, bits and pieces, servono per collegare. Non esistono immagini di Mr. Allen e dice, ottima idea quella di girare delle immagini, minchia, cioè, scusate,
ma non hanno
ci sono delle foto,
impianto,
ci sono delle foto.
Tu ce l'hai?
Ce le manderà, tanto non c'è freddo.
Vabbè, io adesso devo fare altre cose e poi le parliamo.
Sì, certo. Ok. Tra l'altro qui, io non mai stato. Perfetto. Per inglobare tutto quanto. Tra l'altro questo premio è, cioè tutti i premi Nobel del board devo dire.
Ho fatto la chiosa, mettono insieme i migliori cervelli sulla terra che fanno. Magari qualche grafica.
La grafica c'è magari io sapevo questo. Ciao tesoro. Tanto è una cosa senza scadenze. Shall we start? Maybe the can you close the window, please? you okay with the air conditioning, or do you feel it's too cold? Maybe it's too cold. Your son? Hmm? It's okay for you? No, it's okay. No, no. So, the panel is in two. Okay, cold. Okay, we'll do something. So we can start. So good morning, everyone, and welcome again to Global Energy Prize Summit 2018 in Italy. It is a pleasure to be here at the Polytechnic of Turin. As we said before, today we have the great opportunity to join together people from different backgrounds and ideas. This is from where new ideas stem. We can consider this summit as a way to sow the seeds of new growth in energy discussion. This is why it's important to listen to the opinions of Mr. Re-Kwon Chung. Mr. Chung, welcome to the podium. The Global Energy Prize International Award Committee member, UN Secretary General's high-level expert and leaders panel on water and disaster, advisor to the chair, Professor Emeritus at Institute of Convergence Science and Technology of Incheon National University, Korea. Mr. Chung advocates low-carbon green growth as a new paradigm to sustain economic growth and job creation while coping with the risk of climate change. For his contribution to the report of IPCC on technology transfer as lead author, he received a personal copy of Nobel Peace Prize awarded to IPCC in 2007. Mr. Re-Kwon Chung will tell us about the challenges of meeting targets of Paris Climate Agreement. Mr. Chung.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, nice to meet you, and it's my privilege to be able to meet with you and to present my a little bit different perspective on the challenges for energy issues. I have been a negotiator for climate change for a long time and involved in as a Korean diplomat as well as a UN official, as an advisor for Secretary General Ban Ki-moon when Paris Climate Agreement was agreed. And during those about more than 2 decades of negotiations on climate change, I strongly felt that we are one of the most important challenges is actually not only just technology or innovation or finance, but at the same time, the policy. What kind of policy is going to be making us to meet the challenges of climate change? And as you know, already Paris Climate Agreement was already presented in the earlier presentations in the first session that Paris Climate Agreement is emphasizing that we should do our best to stabilize 2 degrees, even moving towards 1.5 degree. That was the goal set by the Paris Climate Agreement. But all those data we are getting now is showing that we are not sure whether we will really achieve those targets, especially after calculations of many of the institutions. Now they say that it will be most probably we will end up 2.7 or 3 degrees Celsius warming, even with the Paris Climate Agreement. So with these challenges, what we should do in order to really achieve the targets we are supposed to achieve. We heard a lot about technological innovations. It's very encouraging to know that there are so many good technological innovations and technologies available to push our targets. But as we heard already a little bit, this was among the yesterday I got in the lounge in the airport. It says that oil demand will still continue to rise even after 2030 and 40. So all this news, there are many reports. I don't want to bring you all those graphs and everything. It's showing that we are not getting there yet. Then the question is, can we really meet the target with only technology, innovation, and money issues. That is a big challenge. For me, the real challenge is what kind of interdynamics between the economics issue and the energy issue can be transformed towards a positive synergy. The current situation we are stuck in now is the negative vicious cycle where CO2 emission is aggravating the climate change, as well as also even stifling our air pollution and even economic dynamism. So now I see that there are 3E, which many people call it, the vicious cycle of 3E, which means energy, economics, and ecology. So we have to get out of this dilemma of those vicious cycle. The Paris Climate Agreement asked all member states to bring about low GHG emission development strategy by 2020. So all the countries are supposed to present their strategy for low GHG emission development strategy. Real question is it really possible to continue our economic growth and prosperity while we are reducing the GHG emission, as was mentioned by many presenters earlier? Here comes in the issue of the policies. What kind of policies are necessary? Because when we are discussing a lot about these challenges, I see there are lack of discussions, not sufficient analysis and emphasis on the policy dimension. IEA recently released a report, very recent report, about energy technology perspectives. It says technology is available. We can go carbon neutral by 2060, depending on all the technologies available. But the conclusion is, in order to achieve those targets, we need unprecedented policy actions to achieve those targets, such as, for example, doubling of our energy efficiency by 2050. Is it really possible? Can we really double our energy efficiency? And not only that, we have to double our renewable energy sources. All these things are all depending on policy issues. But surprisingly, whether it is on the media, whether it's in the politics, or whether in the global negotiations, we don't discuss much about what kind of policies will be needed to push those changes. What I want to emphasize here is that unless we change the dynamics, negative dynamics, because many people think investing in energy transition is costly, it takes time, and it undermines economic growth. For example, the very famous person who is a skeptic about the climate change, he wrote an article from Denmark, Bjørn Lomborg said, with the Paris Climate Agreement, US economic growth rate will go down by 0.8% by 2030. EU economic growth will go down by 1.6% by 2030 because it is costing $1 to $3 trillion every year. So it is extra cost and burden on the economy. It will stifling the economic growth, and all the economy will suffer. So this is a very interesting argument, and this message was spread out by all world media, CNN, Wall Street Journal, Guardian, all the media has been spreading this negative message. And this message has made the perception of the policymaker, business people, and many of the people's mind that action for climate change is costly and it will cut down our prosperity. So this kind of argument is underlying the challenges we are facing. So then, is it really, then I think we have to discuss about also, is it really true? Is it the only way, only dynamics between economics and energy? Isn't there any other dynamics possible? That was actually I was focusing on for about 10 years. Then I came out with the report about low carbon green growth roadmap. I was arguing that investing in low carbon or low GHG emission can drive economic growth. So we can achieve two goals at the same time if we can frame certain policy options. And I was focusing on what kind of policy options can be necessary. That was what I have been focusing on. And I came up with the idea that we need to reform our price structure of our energy system, because the current price structure of our energy system is favoring fossil fuel. We are giving a lot more energy subsidy for the fossil fuel than even to the renewable energy. Fossil fuel is getting the 4 times more subsidy than renewable energy. This is the policy dimensions I'm talking about. So under this policy frame, how can we expect the innovations or actions for transition can happen? So this is, to me, is a very challenging and not easy. But the answer lies in the fact that if we can believe such an action can continue and support economic growth in the future, then I think we can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Ray Kwon-chung. Thank you for staying on time. I know you have so many things to say, but I just like to ask you whether you think the policies to support energy transition have been discussed enough so far.
Yes, as I said, that issue, I personally believe we should discuss a lot more on what kind of policy. For example, carbon tax. We didn't discuss much about this subject for a long time. I still remember at the conclusion of the Paris Climate Agreement in Paris in 2015, President Hollande from France, he promised he will push for carbon pricing global coalition of like-minded countries to push for the transformation of energy policy. But since after he left, I don't hear much about what is happening about his promise and the commitment to push for global coalition for carbon tax. And I think the main problem is still we have a very strong and deep-rooted fear that carbon tax will kill the economy and it will kill the business. That is a very strong perception about such a negative perception. But is it true? We have a lot of literatures from OECD, even Germany. Germany tried that eco-tax reform in 1999 to 2003. And there's an excellent report from Berlin Economics Institute saying that if we introduce switching the tax base from income to energy consumption, we can achieve economic growth, job creation, and also CO2 emission reduction at the same time. So this was a very interesting analysis and paper. But unfortunately, these papers don't catch the eyes of the many media, and we don't hear about it so often. That's the problem.
It's always media's fault.
No, not the media.
Always. Thank you, Mr.
Can I add one more point?
Yes, of course.
The only issue, how can you shift from this dilemma, is to shift our focus from short-termism to long-termism. Because those shift from our current paradigm, we are only our business, our finance, our technological investment, these are all confined, defined by the return in the short run. Nobody can think about the return in 10 to 20 years later. This is the main reason why we cannot jump from short-termism, negative vicious cycle of energy dynamics towards a positive dynamics in the long run. So main focus, the main dilemma, how can you shift from short-termism to long-termism? Actually, it's not an easy task because we are in a democratic system where politicians are voted every 2 to 3 years, that they cannot think about the long-term goals. Thank you.
This is the big problem. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Our next speaker, Mrs. Marta Bonifer, Global Energy Prize International Award, a committee member, advisor to the Agrinova University of Turin Scientific Committee. Mrs. Bonifer is also member of the board of the CE Gender Network, member of the board of the head of Environmental Committee of the Hungarian Business Leader Forum, and many other things. For more than 25 years, she works in important positions for governments, international and environment agencies. Mrs. Bonifer was also the executive director of the Regional Environmental Center for Central and Eastern Europe. And she has her personal views on meeting targets of Paris climate agreements. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying good morning, good afternoon, because I'm just before noon. Also pointing out that we are in a very interesting location with very interesting partnerships. Because with Professor Profumo, we were working very closely together in the EU-China Clean Energy Center, 5 years, transforming a lot of good deed that you could be thinking about and taking these experiences. And when you signed the Memorandum of Understanding and bilateral agreement with Global Energy Prize that I'm engaged in, I think this type of partnerships, this kind of institutions are going to be helping something that I'm a clean believer, building trust, building partnerships, because that's the only way forward. Without that, you can have science, you can have technology, you can have politicians, media, but you stay in your own silos. And your silos will never take you any place. And you are in the room mostly from Generation Y. So Generation Y is going to be reforming our systems for the future. Our systems need reforming because the trends that we are seeing, the mega trends, rapid urbanization, climate change, resource depletion, shipping, global economy power, demographic, social changes, and technology and innovation are all issues, but you can name many more, depending where you are standing from. But you also have to understand that we feel it on our skin. What we feel on our skin is that the world is getting warmer and warmer. From the recorded years, 17 of the hottest appeared in our time. And out of it, 4 of them were the last years. Unfortunately, this trend is also continuing, according to the World Meteorological Organization Secretary General. 2018 didn't bring cooler Arctic and more water in Cape Town. So the tendencies are there. And when you look at this map, which shows all the hurricanes, all the storms, the tropical storms, the different type of natural disasters around the world, these are all extremely important to look at when we talk about the future. When we talk about the future, it's also the numbers. You talked about that how expensive A, B, or C solution is. But I do believe it's more expensive. Just last year, think about the $330 billion that were spent to cover the issues related to natural disasters. Out of it, 85 billion was just Hurricane Harvey. Is it a very expensive problem? Yes, it is. So we have to put, as you were saying very clearly, Professor, the perspectives into the eye of the politicians to be able to address these issues in a better way. And I am a born optimist. And being a born optimist, I do believe that the Sustainable Development Goals that helps to dissolve the silos, that help us to focus on the future, is a clear to-do list for people, planet, and a blueprint for success. And we as countries are all committed to it, and we are working on the implementation. Implementation that you see here are interconnected. None of them will exist without the other. And I was very happy to be in Paris when there was that negotiations about the Paris perspectives, and the Paris Agreement was reached. Out of 1,000 pages and 800 brackets, there came a document of 31. And what is making it very important is that it addresses mitigation, adaptation, support mechanisms, and transparency and accountability. I'm going to be using this word many, many times because what I think is lacking, besides partnerships, is trust. And if this global perspectives can bring trust for the future, the global goals to build resilience and the global goal to phase out greenhouse gases to net zero is not going to be something of science fiction, but it's going to be our reality for the future. I collected a lot of perspectives that why the Paris Agreement is important, besides technology transfer, capacity building, besides the commitment of nationally determined contributions. I think one of the most important is the opportunity. How to use this opportunity of bilateral carbon mechanisms, and this is what we were discussing when we were working together with Polito, technology transfer, capacity building. Last but not least, I'm always saying that don't forget, there is a little frog, and that's us, that is very happily sitting and doing business as usual. And we forget that we need to jump out of the water. So we need radical changes. And I think we tend to forget that radical changes that are part of the climate agreement coming from Paris is the universality, that the international committee is committed to net zero. There are also frameworks that are working on it and helping. The financial sector, and I will hear a lot about it, what the financial sector is going to be doing, hopefully this afternoon. And last but not least, I'm a great believer of business. And business, in hand with technology providers, can drive the change. And we have seen it already happening in many ways. This is just one example of what World Bank came up very quickly with their products and services, and to think about the future, because the future is not only about costs, it's talking about opportunities. Opportunities is also talking with the initiative of President Macron. The political changes happened in France, and now we have a new president who is as eager and interested to continue through the Make Our Planet Great Again concept, but much more keen to bring in the financial mechanisms, much more keen to bring in also the businesses, climate action 100 plus, 225 investors, to drive this process and make a vision for reality. Of course, there are challenges. Of course, there are questions. Of course, there are still saying that it's still very blurred. Can we go forward? It's too loose. It's not really going and translating into action. But it depends on us. And I think it depends on us, and let's try to make that into reality. And one of the most important elements is how to build the trust I was talking about, to the discussion and the process called the Talanoa process, which is bringing inclusive, participatory, and transparent dialogue to build up the stability for the future. But then you say, okay, at the beginning everybody was in, but now the US is out. Is it out? Not yet. Will it be out? I'm looking at Thomas. Will it be out? Who knows? It depends on the elections. But what is really true is that we have 15 states, including your California, that is very much engaged with the Climate Alliance. It is true that there are cities, there are businesses, universities, and colleges. It is true that there are more than 120 companies that have made a commitment. And last but not least, there are technologies that can make the difference. I can put in a lot of technology slides about disruptive technologies, and there could be different, but this is the difference. And please don't forget that on spaceship Earth, there are no passengers. We are all part of the crew. So we have to work together to make this planet as sustainable and as beautiful as we see it from space. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Boniface, sorry, before you leave, just quickly, it's difficult to give a fast answer, but what do you think would be needed more for the successful implementation of the Paris Agreement?
Very simple.
If you just one thing, trust.
You got my message. Trust and partnership.
Thank you,
and we can move the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we have the great honor of hearing from another Global Energy Prize laureate, Klaus Ridley. Mr. Ridley, welcome. He won the prize in 2005, the Global Energy Prize International Award Committee member. Klaus Ridley began to work in the field of nuclear energy, helping to build the reliable and safe nuclear power plants in Germany. Then, for almost 20 years, he worked in thermal power engineering. Am I right? It was under his leadership that the latest generations of high-performance gas turbines of Siemens were developed, which set world records. In particular, the last turbine model allowed the combined cycle plants to overcome the long-time efficiency threshold of 60%. Professor Riedel will tell us about sector coupling, a tool for decarbonization. Is it right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, or following Martha, I would have to say good afternoon.
Thank you.
For anybody frightened by climate change, it must be frustrating to see the global CO2 emissions going up year by year. In the last 30 years, the total emissions, not just energy-related ones, have grown from 30 billions to about 40 billions a year. Many countries make huge efforts to battle that, but so far we only have been able to slow the growth. And we are still light years away from the old Kyoto target of 20 billion tons a year. Now, this slide tells, on the left-hand side, this continuous growth and the slowing down in the last years. And on the right-hand side, one of the reasons. Because so far, most efforts have tackled power and have left out the other three sectors of the economy, that is industry, transportation, and buildings. And if you look at the relative successes, you see power with 40% of the total primary energy used has already 22 supplied by renewable, while the other three sectors, having 55%, so far have only 8% renewable. Now, is there a way to battle that? Obviously, in order to meet the Paris Treaty, more severe methods have to be included. One of them is sector coupling. What do I mean by that? We would make energy, power, hopefully renewable power, the backbone of all energy-related services. Let's go through this slide anti-clockwise, and then this power, supported by some storage, would provide heat via heat pumps or direct heating of houses of some hot water tanks. The next lever is making gas, hydrogen, out of the electricity and converting it maybe to methane, can be stored, and then in the dark, calm for backup power, this gas could be used. And some of the gas even could be used to support heating houses. The third lever would be supplying the food stock for chemical feedstock for chemical industry, meaning H2, ammonia, methane. And the fourth lever would use this renewable energy to provide transportation fuel, either in the form of H2 or some liquid methanol. Now, is such a system complex? Yes, but it has one advantage. One is, if all the energy is supplied via electricity, there are enormous efficiency gains up to 50%. And secondly, the question of energy storage gets all of a sudden much simpler. Storing electricity is a difficult thing, especially for large amounts and large periods of time. But via sector coupling, you can convert the storing into storing hot water or storing CH4 in underground gas storages, or storing liquid fuel in normal tank farms. Now, the question remains, is this the only way to provide renewable power? And I would concur with some of the colleagues, maybe some of the backbone could be done by nuclear or even by coal with carbon capture. Now, as an engineer, I usually like a little bit more numbers to such a concept, and therefore let me narrow my focus from the global view down to a country I know better, Germany, which has, with 80 million, about 2.3% of total CO2 emissions. I went too far. Germany had set rather challenging targets, reducing CO2 emissions from the 1990 level down by 40% till 2020. So far, the country has achieved a reduction of about 26 to 27%, but the further increase gets more difficult, especially since the first half of that decrease was due to the unification of Eastern and Western Germany, when a whole system with old power plants, old heating system, old cars was replaced by more modern ones. The next question remains, will the future target 40% reached by 2020? Unfortunately not, but if you compare it to the Paris Agreement, the 40% usually was set for the year 2030. And if you look into that little square, the biggest challenge for the 2030 target, again, is transportation. Now, how to achieve that? And this sector coupling would be one mean. And there are many studies out how to achieve that. There is even one by a Max Planck Institute who said, let's do it all renewable. And by taking the development of renewable power installed in Germany and the energy harvested, he came up with a statement that in order to satisfy the whole end energy of about 1,200 terawatt hours, assuming that 50% efficiency gain, it would need 860 gigawatts of renewable power. That's a factor of 8 over the already existing fleet, and it makes certain difficulties because that amount of, for example, wind power would make the whole of Germany into one wind park. Not everybody will like that. But there are quite a few more institutes working and sometimes feeding on climate change, and they have put out a large number of studies. What could be the energy system for 2050 in Germany if we allow some 5 to up to 20% of remaining CO2 emissions from fossil fuels? And that template, which was collected by the German Ministry of the Economy gives some min and max values out of those various studies, and it indicates it's obviously not a settled story yet. And let me go through those to this template. For example, it would assume that by 2050, the total electricity demand would vary between 450 terawatt hours, less than today, up to some, let me look, 1,100, in one case, even 3,000 terawatt hours. In order to do that, and the Germans would like to do it with renewable power, it says in the various studies, the renewable power would have to be hiked from 100 gigawatts already installed to 160, and in some study, 540. That's less than the fully renewable study I quoted before. Even with that large amount of renewable power, some backup power, mostly gas-fired in this case, is needed. We have some 30 gigawatts of gas-fired plants. It would have to be hiked to some 50 to 70 gigawatts. And now we turn to the question of transportation. You see in those studies, some request 180 gigawatts capacity for creating H2 and fuel. Some say we can do it without. In the case of the 180 gigawatts, we would just for that purpose need another 600 terawatt hours of electricity. And similar are the variations in how much of that backbone electricity has to be turned into heat or fed into transportation vehicles. So all I want to say with this, there are many models out, and so far they do not agree on the outcome. And my recommendation would also be, let's not just concentrate on providing that power via renewable means. There are two questions remaining. One, will such a complex system and change work? It might. And I guess as a good engineer I would say, let's take all the individual components, sometimes combine it into a system and test them so we know it will work. Will we have the money to do that? It's difficult because some of the predictions, what would be a turn into renewable society have been greatly misleading. About 10 years ago, the then Minister of the Environment from the Green Party said, the whole change would cost about 1 scoop ice cream per family in months. Right now, we are close to 100 scoops of ice cream. It's still affordable, but predictions are difficult. If you ask, what would such a sector coupling cost for the whole of Germany? As in the case of East Germany, it would need new power system, new transportation, new heating system, so the whole infrastructure would have to be changed like in a country after a war. The government says this is an experiment, we cannot quote numbers. If you go to the different studies, they will say 1.5 to 2.5 trillion, which for a country, just Germany, is a lot of money. What are my conclusions? And first, I should warn, and my colleagues know that, I am a little bit skeptical about the climate change, but as a responsible engineer, I still would say we should continue with that sector coupling in a testing demonstration effort because it has one advantage. It would show us the way to a society without any fossil fuel. And if we have successfully tested these systems, and if, to provoke my colleagues, in 20 years' time, we still need or feel we need to battle climate change, then we have a system ready to go for a fully decarbonized system in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Riedel. Before you leave, you anticipated my question because I want to ask you whether sector coupling can be taken as a general solution of climate change problems.
Sector coupling is one of those holistic concepts. Yeah. And yes, it can be used as a model where any individual country can say, we mirror our solution towards such a concept. But holistic concepts easily become a creed or even a religion. And then the prophets would push us forward in one direction. And to return your question, it's like asking in the economy scene, is capitalism or Leninism, Marxism the one way? And I would say, those are models we should test our own ideas against.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley. The message is very clear. Thank you. And now, Stephen Griffith, the Global Energy Prize International Award Committee member, Senior Vice President for Research and Development at Khalifa University of Science and Technology. Dr. Stephen Griffith has overall responsibility for research institutes and centers, research partnerships, research grants and contracts, technology management and transfer, research laboratories, and research computing, and will tell us about the impact of the digitalization on the energy sector, global transportation, global oil demand, transportation, and smarter cities.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a big topic, as you can see, digitalization and how that's impacting the energy sector, including its impact on smart cities and transportation. So I'll try to cover the concepts broadly and then give you a few takeaway thoughts that will hopefully give you more information about how digitalization is playing out. Start off to give the context for digitalization, to think about where the energy system has been and where it's headed. If we think back to the 1700s, it's quite amazing to consider the world was largely biomass-based as far as reliance on energy. Then as time continued, the demands for energy became greater and more sophisticated, and likewise, the supply of energy became greater and more sophisticated and more diverse, moving from biomass to going through coal, oil, gas, nuclear, hydro, and now modern renewables. So the question we have before us is, what will the future of energy look like, and what will be those factors which shape the future of energy? You've heard it many times today, I think the demographics are going to be extremely important. The world will approach 10 billion people, many going to cities, particularly in developing countries. That'll be very critical to how the energy system is impacted. Then we have policy. Policy we've heard a few times here. Both explicit and implicit carbon pricing will impact the ultimate demand for energy and its supply. And then what I'm going to talk about today, getting more into the technologies, solar, wind, electrochemical energy storage, extraordinarily important, but I'll be focusing a bit more on those areas of digitalization. In transportation, we start to consider, to complement electric vehicles, the autonomous and the shared vehicle. And then when we consider other technologies, which are maybe not is thought about as much in the energy space, but very important, things like three-dimensional printing, which is the formation of a digital file, which allows you to ship electronic information to places to be manufacturing goods rather than shipping the goods themselves. That will impact the energy system potentially very profoundly. So the impact of digitalization, I mean, what is it really that much that we're going to have multiple discussions about that? And I think this slide here from the World Energy Council and their World Energy Issues Monitor gives you that answer. In the most recent issues of the Energy Monitor, what was shown is between 2010 and 2017, amongst those different trends which have moved the most sharply toward perceived impact by the industry, as well as uncertainties of the impact, digitalization is at the forefront, to complement, of course, battery electrochemical energy storage and renewable energy, distributed energy. So it's a key trend, it's a key issue that needs to be looked at closely. But it's still abstract. Digitalization, what does this actually mean, and how do we think about it? And I think that requires at least a little bit of background in the way I think about this. So this slide encompasses much of what digital is today. The first thought is around the Internet of Things, the ability to collect information about people and places and things in massive amounts, connect that data to storage repositories and also the repositories or the systems which can analyze these data, and then provide both situational awareness as well as increasing amounts of foresight, which starts to lend toward that thinking of artificial intelligence. So it creates this cybernetic loop, the system dynamic, which allows you to take information and transform it into knowledge. But this is not the end of digitalization. Digitalization actually is far more. And I would say, if you look at this slide, what I just showed, an Internet of Things and big data analytics to get insights from data is just the start. Moving into the future, the entire realm of artificial intelligence, which is multiple talks into itself, is going to be extraordinarily important. That, as I mentioned, trying to give more foresight to computer-based systems, give them more human-like intelligence. Then we get into the areas of robotics and drones being flying robots essentially, can do multiple things impacting multiple sectors. Anywhere where the work is dull, dirty, dangerous, a robot should be used. Then we consider the virtual and augmented reality, which is extraordinarily important for training and making workers more productive, whether on an offshore platform or they're working in a power plant. We then consider the blockchain, this distributed ledger of information, which cuts out intermediaries when you have transactions between people, and ensuring there is still that security that your credit card processor, for instance, might provide you today. And then finally, I mentioned already, the advanced materials and the digital manufacturing is one of those technologies I think is going to be extraordinarily transformational. It will impact energy in a number of ways, and it's probably not as much heard about as some of the topics we'll talk about today, particularly around the autonomous vehicle. So with that background, I start to talk about the city piece. So I mentioned previously urbanization was key. What is the growing importance? I think this is actually the alum cycle was mentioned, the same issue of MIT Technology Review of the breakthrough technologies of this year. And here there was talking about smart cities, and particularly the Sidewalk Labs company of Alphabet, which people all know is the parent to Google, are now creating sort of the operating system of future cities. And so the idea is you have the infrastructure, you have that sort of social layer, that fabric of the transportation system integrated with the building system, all working underneath a digital layer. And so having this sensing capabilities, analytical capabilities, shaping and actuating the way energy systems and people work is extraordinarily impactful and influential. And as we can see here, just the beginnings with this, the first demonstrator in Toronto that will be done by this subsidiary Alphabet, Sidewalk Labs, small demonstrator, but it's going to try and further advance the total sustainability of cities in the affordability, which is the economics, the social side of it, the livability, and then the environmental component. So the city part and the transportation part of this story start to come together very clearly in the technologies that we're seeing for the future. Then if we move on to a consideration of what the buildings in the cities, how they'll be impacted by digitalization, last year the International Energy Agency had a very nice report that quantified a number of different potential impacts of digitalization. And so the next couple slides are sort of abstracts or taken from that report. In buildings, if we can start to impact the greatest energy loads, which is the heating, the cooling, the lighting, for instance, the opportunity to reduce energy consumption is substantial. As you see here, and using the IEA's World Energy Model, predicting out to 2040, the cumulative savings that can come from shifting around the loads of heating and cooling and trying to reduce the amount of energy consumed in buildings through smart technologies can be equivalent to, the cumulative amount by 2040 can be equivalent to more than twice the amount of energy consumed by all buildings in the world in this past year. So digitalization in buildings themselves alone is extraordinarily impactful. But the story doesn't stop there, because cities are integrated systems, and so they're much more complex than just the buildings. If we start to think about this more challenging view of the electricity grid, what we'd like to do is ultimately be able to forecast both supply and demand of energy, and forecast particularly when it's going to be intermittent renewables, and try to balance these different demands and supplies of energy in a way that allows us to forego energy storage to the extent possible. And so we do that by taking, for instance, these heating and cooling loads, which have nice thermal inertia, moving them to periods when we know we have supply of energy, and then reducing the demand when we have periods where there's less supply of energy. And so you don't have to put any more storage into the system, but you start to balance and reduce the overall amount of power infrastructure required. And so again, using the models that IEA has, in the next couple of decades, we could see a place like Europe reduce curtailment, which is essentially the inability to use wind and solar energy, which is intermittent, reduce that to below 2% versus a baseline situation in the model of about 7%. So we can use much more of this infrastructure we're building around renewables. Then as the electric vehicle comes into the picture, we'll see these cars needing to charge. And we don't want them all charging at the same time. We want them to charge in a coordinated, smart way. And if we are able to do this effectively, we can reduce by almost half the amount of power infrastructure required to marginally support electrical vehicles. So the digital piece of this system is extraordinarily important. I would say, reflecting back on the earlier parts of the conversation, we talk digital, we cannot go without mentioning electricity, because it really is a glue that holds together multiple sectors in digitalization. So we talk about the power sector, the future would be electrified and digital and distributed. When we talk about transportation, we look about sharing, we look about autonomy, we look about electrification. So electricity ultimately brings this all together in a very meaningful way. And this becomes very important when we think about one of the questions that was posed at the talk. When we think about cities, we think about buildings and transportation, what would the impacts that digital would have on, say, oil companies, on other key components of today's economies? And so I think this slide was actually very useful. It was from BP's not most recent report, the prior report, the nice graph of how digitalization through autonomy and light-duty vehicles, and then electrification and ultimately ride-sharing incrementally increase the demand for oil. And so, of course, the more cars you deploy, which are electrified, shared, or autonomous, the more you'll have an impact on oil, taking barrels off the market relative to the baseline. But the key takeaway is autonomy itself. Again, this is the marriage of electrification, and autonomy. You don't have as much of an impact by just autonomy. In fact, you may drive a lot more if you're in a vehicle that drives you when you can be hands-free doing other things. And if you're on a petrol-based internal combustion engine, it may be worse for the environment than being in the status quo. When you get to electrification, though, with autonomy, and there's a nice unification and synergy there, you start to have the true impact on taking barrels of oil off the market. And then finally, if you have digital technologies, you have these apps which allow you to hail a ride, or ultimately, if you're with your friend, you can ride right-sized vehicles and share rides with people. You have the most impact by having the autonomous, electrified, and shared transportation system. And so all these different graphs here, you see BP itself in 2017 just looked at electrification. They said, well, 2035, and maybe a delta of a couple million barrels. It's not that big of a deal. Bloomberg New Energy Finance tried to look at the whole impact, digital, shared, autonomous, and electrified, and said that can have a much bigger impact. If we're going to have 300 million, near 300 million vehicles by 2035, the impact would be 5 to 10 million barrels of oil reduced relative to status quo. So I think the cartoon speaks for itself. What will the incumbent companies do? Will they be prepared, or will they assume that the future will be no different from the past? Challenge will be faced in front of us, and then we don't need to react because they're just scarce. They're not ones to be concerned about. So that's the conclusion. I would say the message to take away is digitalization is coming quickly. It is the number of technologies are going to be impactful for our energy future, and so we need to be aware of what these technologies are and think about how to integrate them into systems to make this digitalization opportunity one that's maximally to our benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Well, we are short of time, but it's too interesting. About artificial intelligence, could you provide 1 or 2 examples of how it's being applied for digital transformation in the energy sector?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, it's this abstract term in many ways, but it's really, to me, it's taking computer-based systems and trying to give them more perception of situational awareness and foresight. And there are many different ways in which we can build an AI system. And machine learning is the popular area that today people talk about deep learning, but also statistics and data mining feed in. What's interesting about this is not the deep learning, machine learning, but it's how you take these capabilities, these basic analytics, and roll them up into things like computer vision, the ability for a robotic system, for instance, to have natural language processing, to have speech recognition, to have anomaly detection, to have motion and path planning, so we have movements among these autonomous systems. When you have all these components which rely on these basic AI techniques, then all of a sudden you have the ability to create, for instance, an autonomous vehicle which can drive itself and do it safely, because we have this fusion of data. It's a vision system, it's a GPS, it's different wavelengths, electromagnetic spectrum, radars and lidars all coming together, fed into a network which can make rapid decisions based on massive information in a trained, somewhat brain-like system, although it's not quite a good analogy because that's not where we are today with the technology, but it's more like a human in the way it can receive information and have outcomes, perception that allow us to make rational outcome. The other areas, I think, just a couple, just to say, I mentioned a lot of things that can be negative for the oil and gas sector. The artificial intelligence can have many impacts that are beneficial in the sense, any area where you have machinery that requires maintenance, we don't want to have the machine break down before we provide support for it. We don't want to have to do routine maintenance, which is not necessary. We want to be able to take all the information of the system, feed that, train an artificial intelligence network, and then be able to predict when the maintenance needs to happen. That can be beneficial for wind turbines, it can be beneficial for the oil and gas sector. Multiple different industries will be radically and dramatically impacted by the ability to have predictive maintenance, again, from artificial intelligence type technologies. So it's a very transformational, overarching umbrella of capabilities and techniques, and those are just a few that I would like to have shared.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griffith. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. Same subject, other ideas for our next speaker, Sauro Pazzini, the Global Energy Prize expert, the past director of Enel Research, a consultant in the field of energy and president of the International Flame Research Foundation. Sauro Pazzini spent his professional life in Enel with the different roles in research and engineering, always focused on development and implementation of new generation technologies. More recently, as director of research, he was active in the field of zero-emission power generation, renewable energies, energy efficiency, and
Thank you very much.
so you have the same subject.
Yes.
So we are waiting to
Same
hear
subject,
from
but
impact of digitalization on the energy sector.
different talk. First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's late, but you are still all awake. And thanks to the organizers for having invited me to talk here. When you are one of the last speakers, you are lucky because the previous speaker has typically have set the scene. Therefore, you can get deeply in the subject that you want to talk. And I will be talking on the evolution of the electricity field. That is an area that I know very well, and which can be the impact of digitalization on the operation of the field, and which can be the final results of this integration between energy and digitalization. First of all, let me give you a brief description of which is the situation today in the field. Many of these topics have already been touched. We see a lot of renewables. We have, in the last years, we have always underestimated the evolution of renewables, fortunately. Today, they are starting to be competitive in certain areas of the world against the conventional technologies. Therefore, you can invest in renewable without having to be supported at all. What is important, the forecast of the investment from today to 2040 do say that 70% of the money that we are going to invest in new capacity will be in renewable, and we have always made a mistake underestimating this. And 60% of the electricity in 2040 will be made through renewables, and that's another very interesting number. Renewable do take characteristics, that is that they very often, especially solar, are decentralized energy. We are not seeing a big investment in large new capacity, but in a lot of small capacity that is entering into the grid and that we have to manage. Just to give you an information that I've been looking this morning, in Italy, in the last 10 years, we have installed 20 gigawatt of solar energy. 20 gigawatt is 15 nuclear power stations, roughly. These 20 gigawatt are formed of 730,000 plants. This means that the mean size of the plant that are giving this 20 gigawatt is 26 kilowatt. Just to give you an idea of how the scenario is completely changing. Something that is still coming, we are yet in its infancy, is mobility. Mobility will be important because it will be a consumer of electricity, but will be important also because it will participate to the management of the grid because it can be a distributed source or supplier of energy. Therefore, still not very much important, but the forecasts say that in 2040 we will have more than 50% of electric cars. More than 50% of the cars sold in the market will be electric, and we'll have 30% of the population that will be electric. And we start seeing the first real decision taken by the big manufacturer that do show that this is a trend that will be probably followed. And we are going to see the big change between 2055 and 2030. But that's again another actor, decentralized, that we have to take into account to manage the whole generation grid. What does this changes, this trend take into the grid? They take variability, first of all, because renewable, you cannot dispatch them. You can forecast, but you make mistakes. But you have to develop a system that can help you in managing the variability of the renewables. You have decentralized generation, and you have to manage it. You have a lot of self-consumption. There's a lot of generation that is made by people that are using it and in some cases want to sell part of it. Therefore, you start having a very complex system that you have to manage. And you cannot manage with the standard configuration, or at least when the level of this trend is low, you can manage it, but you have to start preparing for managing when the impact of this phenomena will be higher, because the conventional system will not work. And digitalization can supply a very important role. When I say digitalization, you have had, let's say, a very good presentation by the speaker before. I will concentrate in what is really connected to the management of the grid. The key enabling factor of digitalization that I am going to take into account are, first of all, the data, the sensors. Low-cost IoT sensors are available, and they will be distributed everywhere. Therefore, you are going to start having information on all your system. Second important aspect is communication. You will have access to this information in real time, and you'll be able to manage it. Then you will have low-cost storage and low-cost computing for doing analytics, or if you are more clever, artificial intelligence, as was said before. I will show you some of this first application of digitalization, how they have already been developed and how they are being used for start understanding how to manage the complexity of the future grid. First of all, this is something that probably most of you have in your house, system based on app and on IoT sensors that can support you managing the efficiency of your house. They can be more simple, only managing heating and cooling. It will be more complex in the future when you start having storage, you start having your car that can act as a, let's say, you have to charge it or discharge it, but the concept is quite simple. They will optimize your, let's say, limited generation system. Maybe you can add some intelligence, some forecasting of the weather, therefore you know how to better manage your PV. Maybe you can add some information on the cost of electricity, but they do optimize the operation of your house. This is existing technology. There are a lot of products. Google is participating. All big players are participating. But they need to be improved in order to be able to use the benefit that they create for the management of the grid. Then you have something more complex that again has been touched before, that is demand management. With distributed generation, with renewable energies, you always have the problem of balancing the demand with the generation. Therefore, one way that you have is to move, to ask the demand to move it in other areas in which you have more energy on, or the electricity costs less. This is something, again, that is going on and can support in managing the peak. You can manage the peak just avoiding the use, the demand in that area, not only asking to the big clients as you were doing in the past, but also to the distributed clients that you are starting having, as again a problem of communication, as a problem of also not only communication in terms of getting information, but communication in terms of sending signals, because you need to act on the consumer house. Virtual power plant is another example. You can manage distributed generation by one central point. There's an example, old example, that is a utility that can manage 9,000 megawatt only with 40 people. They have connected a lot of plants in Germany. They dispatch these plants based on the request of the market, and they can do it very easily. New version of virtual power plant is what Tesla is doing these days in Australia. They are installing 250 megawatt of distributed generation, involving 50,000 roofs. That means 50,000 panels coupled with storage. This will be a system in which they will be probably able to manage the supply of electricity to these people, only keeping them almost independently from the grid, or let's say reducing the interaction with the grid, therefore favoring in a very effective manner the exploitation of more renewable energy without having to control the grid. Again, you become more complex. Distributed management system that try to couple the grid and the behind-the-meter generation. This is something that is very difficult. There's a very big separation, typically, also by legislation, between what you do at home, what is necessary for supporting the grid. There are first pilot tests done by utilities in which they are developing software that used by utilities that can support the grid coming in your house and managing your system. My last slide is the future is going, we are going toward this way, where everything will be integrated. We will have information on a lot of generating system, which is their situation, which is their status, and we need to send them information on how we want them to produce. We will be able to integrate in a geographically distributed way demand and generation. This slide is only for the electricity. You can integrate it, and this is obvious, as was said before, with gas and with heat, and will make it still more, let's say, integrated and complex. That's the way we are going to see the evolution of the electricity. We are still in the infancy, but this will be, let's say, strategic for also supporting us in reaching the target of reducing the global emissions. Thank you.
Mr. Fazzini. First, thank you. Digitalization is affecting many areas of the energy sector value chain, and there are many opportunities. Which are the solutions that are more promising shortly?
I think instead of talking of solution, I would like to say what do we have to do in order to, let's say, favor the evolution of this field. And I think there are two main areas that are very important. One area is the standardization, that is standardize and open the protocol, allowing all the companies that are interested in participating to the game. This is difficult, but not too much. The second area that is still more difficult is the rules. We need to define rules for the actors participating to the game in order to be sure that the game is done in the most effective way. Who is in charge of the stability of the grid? Who can do what? Who are the players? if we define this, there are all rules, we can open the game for everyone that want to participate and not only to large players, and this will, let's say, be more effective and productive.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pazzini. And there are so many information, so much on the table today. So our last speaker is Dominique Fash, the Global Energy Prize expert, a member of the board of directors of Technopark Sofia Antipolis, chairman of the board of directors of RTF, an independent director. He held the position of advisor of the Russian Technical Oil and Gas Conference and Exhibition of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. He founded, as we said, the company RTF, Russian Technological Fund. So Mr. Fash's speech will warn us about threat on the grid. So are we facing a big threat?
Merci, thank you. Thank you for staying. I'm going to be the last one, so I'll try to keep the rule of not of the 3E, as was said, the 3S, to be short, simple, and stupid, you know. I'll make a short introduction about me. I'm sorry, but I want to understand, you understand where I'm coming from. I'm a little bit different. I'm coming from, I'm French. I've been involved in the Sofia Antipolis project, which is very close from here in Nizza. I came this morning by car, and I've been involved in research and innovation during the first 20 years of my career. Then I decided to go to Russia in '91. It was not the easiest time to go, but very, very interesting. And I became the CEO of Schlumberger, you know, a small company, a small startup, which was very successful in Russia. I was 14 years as CEO of Schlumberger. Then I switched to coal, so I know quite well, to SUEK, which is the biggest producer of coal in Russia. And then I become the CEO of Enel in Russia, the 7 years when we acquired a big chunk of ROES of Russian energy. It was about 7% of Russian energy. I was also in the Market Council in Russia, which I was confronted with the real tools of the market in Russia. And basically, I lived in Russia the last 25 years, and I speak Russian. I want to make 3 short remarks before going to my main question. The first one is my deep respect to Igor Lobovsky, who left, as you know, but he was the man who created this energy prize. And I think I have a deep respect for him, and I hope the next Ignatov will do the same kind of good job that he did. The second one is linked to the place we are, Politecnico. I like the Politecnico. I know the reputation. And I think it's the best tool in the next years to restore the connection with Russia. For us in Europe, connection with Russia is vital. It's vital for us and vital for them. It's very important. And I know the Politecnico has a strong cooperation with Russia. I'm doing that. I'm involved in the Mining Institute of St. Petersburg, and developing a project in Europe today. As you know, we are not in the best political environment, situation, conflict time, and so on. But this is the real time to rebuild bridges. It's very easy to blow a bridge. It took 3 seconds. It takes 3 years to rebuild, you know. And we have to do it. It's part of our future. And the third remark is about that. The possibility, Macron was in European Parliament yesterday. He was talking about that. I think we have to rebuild, and the new generation, you are young people, have to rebuild another Europe. My generation, we have the chance to live in a Europe with no war. At the end of the day, it was a plus. But everybody understands that the Europe of bureaucracy in Brussels is dead. So we have to rebuild at Europe, and we have to rebuild in Europe, this Europe, with Russia, and rebuilding through education and science. Now I'm come to the subject, and I think I would make it without slides about the 5 paradoxes of the energy world today. The first one, we are in a complete revolution. Total is buying batteries. Total yesterday bought Direct Energy. They are going to sell electricity. Enel changed completely his business model. Germany, Merkel took a decision to close 22 nuclear blocks. France, even EDF, the government is thinking about closing some nuclear station. You see the mess. So everybody lives now in a changing world where the old situation that we had, the old story for France, for instance, when de Gaulle decided to launch this nuclear program, we have 58 nuclear blocks. It was a long time investment because a lot of money. Now we are facing a situation where the energy mix, we don't know what's going to be the energy mix in 5 years from now. And when we are investing, when I was at Enel, we invested in several blocks of classical generation, gas-fired. It's about half $500 million each. You are investing for 25 years. So all the energy companies are facing this dilemma today, what we are going to do. And even they have to change under pressure their business model to survive. That's the first one. You have to keep in mind this question. The second paradox is the climate paradox. A lot of people have been talking about this climate. You know, I'm not going to talk about the political situation, the Trump story, and so on. I'm just going to say one word about if we want to do it, we have to put a price to the ton of CO2. If we don't put a price to the ton of CO2, we can talk a lot. We will have a lot of Hollande talking about beautiful Paris and climate and change. If we don't put a price, and a price which will be around $100 the ton, if it's less, it's not going to have any impact on the situation. So the key question is the price of the CO2 for us. The third is nuclear. We have a real controversy about nuclear. It's not so much the nuclear problem in Fukushima. By the way, Fukushima is not a nuclear problem. It's a second nuclear problem. The first one was the real problem was the tsunami. But we have a real problem in nuclear today when you look at the figures. When you look at the new generation of the EPR, we have the problem in France. You remember we have a EPR that we're doing in Finland and the other one in France. We made a mistake to start in Finland. It was a big mistake, but anyway, it's another issue. We are about between 5 and 7 years late. And basically the price has been triple, quadruple, I don't know how much was going to finish. It was to start about 3 billion and we are over 10 billions today. So, and we are not connecting the first EPR in Flamanville before switching to the others. So we have a real issue in nuclear, and we have a real issue in nuclear price of the megawatt. We signed for the 2 additional EPR in Great Britain, the Hinkley Point project, at 120 euros for the megawatt. The megawatt is 35-40 today. And do we count, it's like Stalin, you know, about elections. The important is the guy who counts voices, who counts votes, you know. It's exactly the same. It's the way you use the figure. Because do you count really the real cost of closure? Because, you know, when you close a nuclear facility, it's about the same price that to build it. And basically, do you count the cost of the accident that we have a problem in France, in Bure, and it's going to be also a political problem. So you have a real paradox here in the nuclear. The first one is technology. Some of us are really thinking, hoping in technology, but we have some issue. If you look at the Bitcoin, everybody talking about Bitcoin. Okay, I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin. I'm just going to talk about the expenditure in energy figure of a Bitcoin business. You know that you make one transaction in Bitcoin, it's like having a building of 50 flats consumption. So it's completely nonsense in terms of energy consumption. So we have some technology issue. And I want to put here an emphasis, one key technology. And to put two examples. First one is a negative example. It's ITER. You have heard about this project. Very expensive. We started at 10, even a little bit less. We are 20 today, billion euros of cost. In terms of politics, it's a very good project because it implicates everybody. France, Europe, Russia, United States, and so on. But it's complete dead end. The first real experimentation will be in 2055, the demo story. It's a dead end. It will finish like Super Phoenix. So we are investing a lot of money in a project which is going to be closed. I'm trying to really announce that, but you know, there is a lot of interest involved here. The second one is a positive one. Could we put half of this money on storage issue? Storage is the key. If we have storage, we solve the problem of development of energy, of use of energy. And the last one is what I was telling. Digitalization is very good. I know very well the experience of Enel. I know the Linky. I know all the smart grids project. But it's a window for terrorism. Nobody talks about that. The SCADA are vital, the flow of information, but you are opening the window. We, in France, in Nice specifically, we experimented what is terrorism last year. We didn't experiment up to now what could be terrorism in energy. I hope we will not have that. And just as a conclusion, I would like to remind the famous word of Yamani. The Stone Age didn't finish by lack of stones. It means for the oil producer, it could be, I'm not so optimistic than my neighbor here. They could have a recession in the middle of and have a Venezuelan situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fash. So, as I understand, well, this is the last question. The grid is facing threats by cyber attacks. What can we do?
So we already had some. One famous in Ukraine, one famous in the States. So we have some experience of things like that happening. But I can tell you, it didn't have really. When you had one in Atlanta where the airport was stuck during 11 hours. So you can imagine what's happening in an airport when you put the mess at all the flow of information, connection, and so on. So we discussed that with a Russian specialist, my good friend Evgeny Kaspersky. You know the name of Kaspersky. He's very famous because he's on the blacklist of the US now. But anyway, Evgeny is a very good specialist on this. And we are focusing on this. I'm also a member of a big network company. And we are really working on this to try to protect the company from this kind of hackerization, which is a major threat, and nobody is talking about that.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating and frightening subject to finish. Thank you. But please, I ask you 5 more minutes, because now it's time to play with the energy topic. Because do you remember the QR code I showed you at the beginning? I'm going to read. Did you upload it? Please do it. Can you upload the QR code so you can? Thank you for doing it now. So you can answer in real time to the questions. It's not an exam. It's just to go deeper into the subject. Are you ready? So the first question is, methane, natural gas, does not last as long as the CO2 in the atmosphere, but in the few decades while it is there, its greenhouse effect is worse than CO2. How much worse? 3 times, 12 times, 25 times. Cast your vote. 3 times, 12 times, or 25 times worse than CO2. Well, the last one is really scaring. The second, have you voted? Because then we'll see the way you voted, not you personally, but the audience, of course. The second question is, according to the 2018 BP Technology Outlook, by 2050, digital technologies could reduce net global power demand by what percentage? Less than 5%, between 5 and 25%, more than 25%. Which is the right question, the right answer in European? Is it a big effect or a smaller effect? And the last one. What are the technologies that will shape our world the next years to come? Okay, so technologies that will shape our world the next years to come. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, 5G, renewable and clean energy, energy storage, cross-sector innovation. This is more articulate, more difficult probably to choose. So you can cast your vote. Then we need a couple of minutes to get the results, but I would like to ask Mr. Blees. So this is the first question was inspired by your speech. So, so this natural gas, methane, is not so lasting in the atmosphere as CO2, but it's still a threat. How big? How big? Can you give him, please? So now we are waiting for the results. How big?
What am I supposed to say?
Have you studied? Yes.
Generally, it's considered about 25 or 26 times, but I did a paper on this with several people from various countries, and I think the actual effect is probably about 35 times. But
so,
you know,
even more.
Yeah,
so even more.
It's even worse. But you know, I think that the minimum that most experts would agree is at least 25%.
Well, thank you so much. And Mr. Griffith, so you know well the subject. So the digital technologies that could reduce net global power demand, so how much can they reduce it? Can you?
Yeah, I recall my answer. What were the choices? It's a lot. So it's, if I recall, it was more than 25%. Is that what the answer was? So the idea with the digital technology is what I talked about in the presentation. When we're looking at the power sector, we want to try to reduce demand as much as possible using technology which can shift loads, particularly thermal loads, heating, cooling, and lighting, rather than having to build new infrastructure. And so the reduction in total power demand, if you look at the energy models I was talking about previously, it gets in excess, I think, of 25%, if I recall. I'll have to check the answer on that. But it's certainly not in the low percentages. It's quite a large amount that we can reduce demand toward the middle of this century.
Amongst the many things we heard, that this is encouraging. Yes, this is good news. Okay, when we are ready to give the results of the nearly ready, so Mrs. Can you get the microphone from there? No, you have a microphone here. Yes. So in your opinion, what are the technologies that will shape our world the next years to come?
Actually, I put also in another. And the question is that in different audiences, there is a different order.
Yeah.
So I would be very much interested what the audiences in this room.
In this room.
That are coming up. Generally, when we use these questions, it is the artificial intelligence that is coming up as an issue.
Probably because it's always the last one.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
The solution is also
Yes.
always the last one.
Yes.
Okay, so that could be a nice experiment to see. Okay, we have the solutions probably. Okay. Our technical support will show us. This is a nice experiment, okay? It's not direct democracy, but direct opinion. Oh, let's see. Okay, so most of our audience indicated 25 times for methane threat in the air, and my compliments, because you were right, and that was the right answer. And then we can go to the second question. The second question was about, by 2050, digital technologies could reduce net global power demand by what percentage? Less than 5%, only the 8% of us voted. I couldn't vote because I already knew the solution, so. And then between 5 and 25%, it's a majority, more than 25. But the right answer was more than 25%. How do you comment? Can you comment this result? Maybe you can.
Well, I'm happy because I was right. I thought I remembered the answer. No, so it is a big number, and I think the idea here is if we can use digital technologies, all the ones that I talked about, in each of the different sectors. So if we're looking at buildings and transportation and industry, and we're focusing on power, if we do this right and we deploy the technologies correctly, and we can shift around the loads as we need to, we can do quite a bit to reduce energy demand. Then we don't have to worry as much about storage. So it's a very positive, I think, future for digitalization and an impact on power.
Okay, and I think it's a very interesting experiment. I would like to see it in many other forums and about other subjects as well. And then let's go to the last question, which was the most difficult. So, Mrs. Bonifer, can you help me to comment this result? So what are the technologies that will shape our world in the next years to come? The highest solution is, it's energy storage. And the second is artificial intelligence, but our public here voted for energy storage, maybe because we are in the Polytechnic. So you are not fooled by the new artificial intelligence. No, artificial intelligence is important. So can you describe this? No, that's okay. It works.
What I think is important to know is that there is a huge opportunity. So what you see here is the technologies that you think are very high on this chart are the ones that are going to be really shaping our world in different ways. And the interaction is going to be extremely interesting. And looking into digitalization and the smart cities, I think are going to be the ones that are providing us opportunities for having a more sustainable city structure for the future.
May I say that renewable and clean energy are very high in our hopes.
Yes,
so.
I was very happy about the audiences.
But the right question is all of them.
Of course, for me, there was one that where it said others, and the others would have been all of them.
Okay.
Because you can't really go into silos, but together they make the difference.
So thank you. It's very late, but it's a very interesting experiment to know how our public reacted after this long session. And thank you for participating. And I would like to thank all the expert speakers for their contribution to the discussion today. Well, we will see how the energy issue develops in our rapidly changing world. But we can say that all the information in order to understand the future of the planet's energy have been delivered in this forum today, all the information. So it was an honor and a pleasure. Please continue to follow the Global Energy Prize summits. Thank you so much.